And welcome back, fellow football fanatics. This is College Football with Sam. And week 10 was the epitome of what college football is about and of the new landscape of the sport. You had undefeated teams and teams that were in the college football playoff conversation, especially in the ACC, implode on themselves. With Georgia Tech losing, previously undefeated at 8-0, now 8-1. Miami, previously 6-1, loses as a double-digit point favorite under Mario Cristobal for the second time this year. And in other conferences, the Big Ten and the SEC specifically, Big 12 to a lesser degree, but Cincinnati is technically still alive in their playoff hopes. They're very alive and well. If they win out, they'll go to the Big 12 championship game. But you had in the Big Ten, Nebraska, they got eliminated. You had in the SEC any chance of Tennessee reaching the playoffs. That was sunk. And then you had a few more things occur. So, how do I put this? Well, Auburn's season is done. That's why Hugh Freeze got fired. Nebraska's season is sadly done because Dylan Raiola's, half of his lower leg got snapped in half, which is horrific, and I hope that he heals up. I would caution any of you from thinking that Nebraska as a program is going to implode. Like, season-wise, they'll probably implode. Like, there's a really good chance they'll lose out. They might even finish with a worse record than last year. Like, go to a bowl game, but because the quarterback play just isn't the same, they could lose. They could also win 7 or 8 regular season games, and if you do that with the backup QB, I'm really impressed with what Matt Rule has done in year 3. Regardless of that, though, I think that the intelligent Nebraska fan, the Nebraska brass, and most Nebraska fans, actually, after letting the emotions of yesterday pass, understand that if Raiola were healthy now, if he were healthy for all of last night, USC is eliminated from the playoff picture. Nebraska's alive and very well is guaranteed to get 8 wins, if not 9. The 10th would be difficult to come by with Penn State on the road and then Iowa at home back-to-back, but it would be possible. So there was just so much that happened this weekend. Brent Venables got a big win for Oklahoma. We should be proud of him and the Sooners. Buckeyes and Hoosiers dominated. As expected. I hedged on Ohio State versus Penn State, thinking that either would be a really close game or that Ohio State would win in a blowout. One of those outcomes was correct. It was the blowout. Looked like it could have been close entering halftime, but Ohio State took control. They ran away with it. Ohio State's the only team left in America that's undefeated against the spread. Indiana, with 5 turnovers, was able to overthrow Maryland and give them their 4th straight loss and only loss of the year by more than a possession, which is pretty impressive. So we'll talk about all of these things here, but make sure before we begin to like the video, to click that subscribe button down below, and down below this live in the chat, type away. Send me a super chat, and in between the segments, I will respond to your question with an answer for a minute or two. Make sure as well that you have hit the notification bell because we have a new schedule. I didn't go live today at 10 a.m. on Sunday because I had to put some things together, and I wanted to have breakfast with my family, or technically lunch, but I got breakfast there. It was a really good meal of French toast and steak and eggs and hash browns. Really filling. But from here on out, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Be there. And then for the rest of the week, we'll just be releasing clips and a few other things that will be coming your way. But I have not felt good. I've rarely been able to make that 6 p.m. time that I want to go live at, and I just don't feel good going live at 6 p.m. after the day is over. So earlier in the morning, 10 a.m., I feel like that's good. Tomorrow we'll be live at 10 a.m. Eastern Time to give you my first batch of previews, and also my top 10, my playoff predictions, some coaching carousel news that I have. This is actually it's a really good thing that I remembered this. I almost forgot this. I have to add this to the show real quick. Then we'll begin. We're also going to be giving a very, very early preview of things. Let me find it, though. They're sorry for all of that, but yeah. I just forgot this, and it's something that's very important because I want to be the first to get ahead of this when talking about it. I don't exactly have a lean on this game, but we are going to be doing an early preview at the end of the video, and it is something that, yeah, it's a big game, very big game. I'm just going to tell you guys what I think about it, actually, is what I'm just going to say right now. It's Iowa, Oregon is the game we'll be previewing at the end. But thank you for your patience there. Making sure. Okay, cool. We're ready. We're ready to go. Preview of the game. That will actually come. I'll probably do something later in the week for that. But I do want to. I didn't think about it today. It's especially hard to give a preview now because Michigan's all banged up. But I think I'll do something for that later in the week. Regardless, though, make sure you've liked, subscribed, hit the bell. Let's get to it. I want to discuss Auburn firing Hugh Freeze and what this means. We've had 4 weeks in a row of head coaches being fired left and right. So 4 weeks ago it was James Franklin. Then it was Billy Napier. Then it was Brian Kelly. Now Hugh Freeze gets the boot. Hugh Freeze was 6-16 in SEC games. Hugh Freeze is a offensive coach who has never been able to figure out offense at Auburn. I will admit that I liked the hire for the same reason I believe a lot of Auburn people liked it. Because Hugh Freeze can beat Alabama. And while more of a Big Ten guy, and also in that understand that whether it's Michigan calling Michigan State little brother or Ohio State calling Michigan little brother, those things don't usually end well when you have that mindset. We've seen it play out on the field where Michigan, when they have viewed themselves as above Michigan State, there's a correction that happens and Michigan State's able to win a few games, and it goes back and forth with Michigan being the better program, but Michigan State always making sure almost to hold Michigan's ego in check. We've seen this recently with Ohio State, where when Ohio State's players and coaches finally thought that the game was an automatic win, it turned out that it was one of the most challenging things for Ryan Day to do, is just simply be a competent coach in that game. I feel as if Auburn, in hiring Freeze, was kind of going through an identity crisis where they soaked in the outside negativity of being in Alabama's shadow. And instead of hiring someone that fit the program, that fit its identity, and that could really, exploit the advantages of modern football, minimize the weaknesses of modern college football, limit the negative impacts, and exaggerate and magnify the positive impacts, they hired someone who in the past was just able to beat Alabama. And they showed that's all they cared about. And that's not good enough. It's not good enough whatsoever. When you start 4-5 to begin the year, and your offense can't put anything together, and you're 71st in offensive efficiency, but you're the offensive coach, and you spent money in the portal to get Jackson Arnold, to get Eric Singleton from Georgia Tech, who might wish that he were still at Georgia Tech. When you pay Cam Coleman, you pay Malcolm Simmons to stay back, you spend big money to upgrade the offensive line and the defense. And the defense has been phenomenal with DJ Durkin. But quarterback is a disaster. You can't get your elite wide receivers the ball. And you lose 3-10 to Kentucky. And that is the end of the Hugh Freeze era. We are going to be on the 7th Iron Bowl matchup where there is a unique head coach matchup. That's crazy. 19, Saban versus Malzahn. 2020, due to COVID, Sarkisian versus Malzahn. 2021, it is Harsin versus Saban. 2022, I believe it's Cadillac Williams versus Saban. 23, Saban versus Freeze. 24, DeBoer versus Freeze. And I don't know, actually, if it's confirmed that DJ Durkin's been the interim head coach. You're going to have DJ Durkin versus Kalen DeBoer. Crazy stuff. Crazy times we're living in college football. But with Auburn, it was a situation similar to Florida, where you just had too much talent to look this way on the field. Very similar to Penn State, where with the roster they had, or at least what they thought they had, it was coaching malpractice to field that performance with that roster. Auburn's signature win of the year is against Baylor, and they couldn't pass the ball pretty well in that game. They just ran all over Baylor because Baylor doesn't have a defense. That's why Baylor's a 4-loss Big 12 team that's already eliminated from the conversation of being in the Big 12 championship and in the playoff. They're going to have to win out if Dave Aranda doesn't want to get fired, most likely. So that's that. And for Brian Kelly, it's the same thing. You can't look that way. I am not really opposed to these firings this year. A lot of people are saying, well, are there going to be quality candidates? And that is so short-sighted. That is so myopic. I mean, that is the mentality of, well, who's going to replace Urban Meyer at Ohio State? Hello? Ryan Day? Well, who's going to replace Nick Saban at Alabama? Kalen DeBoer. Well, who's going to replace Mark Richt at Georgia? Kirby Smart. Who's going to replace? I know Dan Mullen got fired from Florida, but at least he won them some New Year's Six Bowls and got into an SEC championship game. Who's going to replace Jim McElwain? Dan Mullen. Who's going to replace Will Muschamp? He won South Carolina 9 games. Can anyone do better than that? Well, bring in Shane Beamer. I know things haven't gone particularly well for them, but they've won 9 games last year. They're recruiting well. Who's going to do better than Manny Diaz? Mario Cristobal. And they're not doing so hot. But hey, he's at least won them 10 games. They'll probably win 10 games again this year, for example. Just these things happen in college football. Yes, sometimes the firings can be too quick. They can be poorly managed. And sometimes you get a situation where who's going to replace Mike Riley? Well, we're going to hire Scott Frost and he's going to suck. Or who's going to replace Paul Chryst? You hire Luke Fickell and for whatever reason he sucks too. Even though I think he's a much better coach than Scott Frost. But just because your pool may not be perfect, just because your circumstances may not be perfect in terms of finding a new leader doesn't mean you don't need a new leader. So all this talk about how some will be disappointed with results, well, that's a given. You're telling me the sky is blue, that some of these coaching replacements won't work. But all of them so far have been absolutely necessary. I have not seen or heard of a firing yet this year that makes me think, what are they doing? What are they doing? That would be like if Nebraska fired Matt Rule, if everything implodes after Raiola gets hurt, or if USC fires Lincoln Riley after they go 8-4 or 9-3. That's what are you doing firing would be. Or if, say, Brent Venables finishes 7-5 or 8-4. It's not what's happening here. Hugh Freeze deserved to be fired. They have looked atrocious on offense. They've recruited well. It doesn't really matter. Things haven't changed all that much. Auburn has not had a winning season since 2020. It's time that were changed. So I think Auburn made the right move here. And a quick note for who I think they need. I think they need a defensive guy. The meta is moving towards, 3 high safety, definitely 2 high safety on defense. That way you can still play the modern defense being a 4-2-5, but be able to bring someone down in the box who can, is capable enough to play as a DB and defend against the spread, but also is capable enough of coming downfield and tackling against the power run. Ohio State has ran 3 high safety. There's many other defenses that have done similar. I mean, Iowa State has run this, though not to the same effect. I think that a tough, thick-headed, but not in a dumb way, just in a stubborn, strong way, a smart, capable, stubborn defensive guy would fit them very well, because defense is something that I believe is easier to control for than offense. I'm looking at John Summerall, if they can get him. And if not him, steal one from your rival, from the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Go Glenn Schumann from Georgia, for example. That's who I think would benefit Auburn a lot, is a strong, no-nonsense defensive guy that can rally support from the boosters, that can hold them in check, that kind of is his own authority figure, and that can bring a winning culture to Auburn. As for other news of the day, I want to discuss Dylan Raiola. He's out for the year. He's got a torn fibula. It sucks. It is what it is, though. Nebraska has to carry on the mission. They have to fight on. They just lost to the team who obviously their slogan is fight on. But he got hurt, and that's terrible. Dylan Raiola suffered a broken fibula last night, November 1st, against USC. I think it was early third quarter. He got tackled, he got sacked, and he was down for a few minutes, and then he had to have assistance coming off the field. It looked like he could walk somewhat normally, but he's out for the year with a broken fibula. Fibula is that second smaller bone below the femur, below the knee. And yeah, I mean, you can't play with a broken fibula. You can't. And he'll have to, much like DJ Lagway, take plenty of time off of practice in the 2026 preseason because of how late he suffered that injury. So he's going to miss part of the preseason too. It sucks in every way. If you're a Nebraska fan, I feel for you. You do not deserve this. And it absolutely changes how the season should be looked at. It changes expectations. It changes results, obviously, seeing how they did not trust TJ Lateef to run the offense in the same way they did Raiola, and he's not capable of running the offense in the same manner. I don't think they expected him to really ever have to come in the game. And you also see that it changes results and expectations from an outsider perspective, where Nebraska right now is an early underdog to UCLA this coming Saturday. What Raiola's injury means for the Cornhuskers is that the season from here on out is a test run. Matt Rule in year 3, I believe we discovered this against Northwestern and Minnesota and for much of Big Ten play. That has more to do with scheduling and being able to win close games than fielding a great team. This is something I warned about preseason. I wasn't right in terms of the end-of-season record, though to be fair, I couldn't account for the QB injury. But I did say that Nebraska was going to win several close games. I picked them to win double-digit games. Obviously, that prediction's over. Is there a path for them to go 9-3? Very challenging to do, but given the fact they're not playing anyone of USC's stature for the rest of the year, I mean, I guess there's a weird scenario where that happens. I think 6-6 and 7-5 is the most likely outcome, followed by 8-4. But again, this isn't a prediction segment for the rest of the season or the rest of November. Matt Rule at Baylor later in his tenure and at Temple. Those late teams, the reason they won so many games is because they won a lot of close games. Nebraska has done that this year. They're 3-2 in close games, and they would have been 4-1 if Raiola were healthy, and they would beat USC if that were the case. So the season from here on out's a test run. What I mean by that is you play TJ Lateef, you let him have full control of the offense. That doesn't mean, of course, that you don't adjust the offense to his strengths. You should run him more than you did Raiola because he can run, whereas Raiola was very limited there to begin with. But don't play scared. Don't be extremely conservative as the game plan was last night, because now with Raiola out for the rest of the year, you don't have anything to lose. You've already reached 6 wins, and yes, Nebraska was hoping for more than that, but they would get more than that if not for the injury. So now you just have to say we're going bowling no matter what. We're not like the old Nebraska teams because we're going bowling back to back. We have to play Lateef and get him as much experience as possible, because based on the fact Nebraska offered him a scholarship and that he started in this game after Raiola went down and they played him bits and pieces there earlier in the year, I would say at some point, if he's patient, he will eventually be Nebraska's starting quarterback after Raiola leaves. Could be wrong there. Maybe he'll transfer out earlier, or maybe they'll recruit someone even better. I know they have a really good quarterback in the 2027 class. But regardless, he's on scholarship. He's playing. Give it a test run. And if the team finishes 6-6, it sucks, but it likely won't be Rhule or the coaching staff's fault. They have faults of their own. We know this. But this team without Raiola was never going to be anything special. Raiola, with Holgorsen, with some of the wide receivers and the corners, those were really the areas of strengths for the team. Quarterback is much more important than any of those positions. For that position to be effectively neutered due to a tragic injury means you have to give the staff and the roster and the team grace, even if they don't win for the rest of the year. So the season's a test run. And what that means is, as a fan, you have to relax. And you should not worry, because worrying does nothing. You are not a part of the team. You are a fan, and Rhule is not going anywhere. He was just given a contract extension. I still think the overall outlook on Rhule is one of optimism due to the back-to-back bowl appearances. And they could win another game or 2 or even 3. I don't think it's very likely they win 2 or 3 more games. I do think it's likely out of those 3 games they get at least 1 more win, so that means an improvement in the regular season. And from there, the 2026 schedule is tougher, but you get Raiola back, and Nebraska's recruited and developed well enough under Rhule and made enough tough coaching changes to where they should be a better team next year than this year. This will certainly be a test of Nebraska's character. I don't think they'll quit, but something like this can cause a team to kind of turtle up or shrivel up. So this will be a test of the staff's character, of the team's character. I'm curious to see how they respond. I expect a positive response in the sense that they're not going to be as conservative as they were in the third or fourth quarter with Lateef. They're not going to panic. They're not going to be a soft team. I think they'll respond in the appropriate way. Whether that translates to wins or not, we shall see. As for Lateef, he's going to get more reps. He'll start in the final 4 games. You'll get to see what he's made out of, and you'll get to see how good of a player he is. If he's able to make some progress here and there, he's a player that will be worthy of keeping. If, say, he's averaging 1 yard per pass attempt in all 4 of those games, then Nebraska may want to free up that scholarship spot, for example. And I think last but not least, the defense has to step up. The defense is healthy. It is a limited unit, yes, but no one, well, I'm not even going to say that. This is the rough story. Iowa and Penn State have similar rushing attacks when called properly for Penn State, because Penn State's play caller there. I don't know what Andy Kotelnicki is doing. That was talk about me misreading a situation. I thought Kotelnicki was elite. Turns out he's not even average. He does not know what he's doing with that Penn State roster. But Iowa is probably a better power rushing team than USC is, and their quarterback in Gronowski's a dog. I mean, so there will need to be defensive adjustments if Nebraska wants to win games. Think about UCLA. Nico, that rushing attack, you're not Indiana. You're not Ohio State. Those are some of the only teams that could really shut that down. Your defense is actually closer to Penn State's than either of those two, and UCLA was able to gash Penn State on the ground. So the defense must step up. They have made some improvements as the season's gone on, but also I think the roster is very limited there. It absolutely sucks that Raiola is out for the season, but with pressure and with adversity, you get to find out someone's true character, and pressure can make diamonds. So with the roster Nebraska has and with the remaining schedule, I wouldn't be shocked if they were to win another game or two. I think if they, especially with this injury, if they simply reach 8 wins this year, the season is a tremendous success. If they somehow reach 9 wins, wow. That would be shocking, but also that would be really exciting, and with the new faces on the roster, that would be fun to watch. Hoping for the best for Nebraska and for Dylan Raiola. That was horrible. I actually thought he would come back in the game at some point. I was utterly convinced of that he would come back in the game. And alas, he did not come back in the game. Instead, he, was out. And you got to watch Nebraska kind of turtle up a little bit. I mean, let me read you the drives that Nebraska had in this game after Raiola goes down. So Raiola goes down. I think it was like the only sack they took. Dylan Raiola sacked for a loss of 10 yards. Crawford recovered it. Raiola got hurt. That was with 12:04 left in the third quarter, so it was early. USC then turns it over on downs. Nebraska with Latif then has a drive for 20 yards, misses a field goal. USC then scores a touchdown to tie it up. Nebraska then drives 10 plays, 57 yards. It was their best drive with Latif in. They settle for a field goal. USC then drives to get a touchdown. Nebraska then has a 13-yard drive on 4 plays to punt it away. USC then punts it away, 7 plays, 30 yards. Nebraska then turns it over on downs, 6 plays, 23 yards. And that was with Emmett Johnson trying to run up the middle and tripping. I think he may have even tripped over Latif in doing so. Like, it was just, when Latif came in, it just a comedy of errors began to flow Nebraska's way. Latif finished literally 5 of 7 for 7 yards and 1 yard per attempt. He had a QBR of 0.4. Like, it was a bad game. It was a very bad game. Earlier in the year, he had fantastic QBRs and passer ratings, but a huge part of that's because he played in garbage time against Akron and HCU. Against real time and against a real defense in USC, he was able to have some success running the ball, but did not have a lot of success passing the ball. They didn't really let him open up. I'm curious to see how they allow the true freshman to manage the offense going forward, because what they produced against USC, you're not winning. You're not beating UCLA on the road with that play, and you're not beating Penn State on the road with that play, and Iowa will beat you by 3 touchdowns if that's the type of offensive play. It just that's what's going to happen if they don't find some offense, find some improvements for the Cornhuskers. That's what will happen. It's sad. Nebraska, I really thought, like, entering halftime they were going to pull it out. It felt like in the second quarter that USC was the better team, but they couldn't get in the end zone. And even if you're the better team and can get into, even if you're the better team, if you're settling for field goals and Nebraska's able to have, a 6-yard drive, or they get down the field quickly right before halftime, or not 6 yards, but 6 minutes, if they're able to move the ball in different ways on you, and it's limited possessions, and they're up by 8 at the half, and they get the ball to start, and they're driving. Even if USC was the better team, and they were, but even if Nebraska won, I think USC would have been the better team, but you're not going to win that way. Well, the QB injury happens, then USC is able to take over. We'll talk about it later. We'll talk about the game later, but, running for over 200 yards and 5 yards per attempt. Nebraska, they themselves had rushing success, and they were able to protect the quarterback, I think, pretty well. But let's talk about Ohio State dominating Penn State. The Ohio State Buckeyes beat the Penn State Nittany Lions 38-14. It was 17-14 at the half. Penn State recovers a fumble that they forced, and they cash it in with a score to make it 17-14 at the half. Ohio State scores 21 unanswered points. They begin to mix up their coverages. Grugmeyer doesn't see the field well. Kolonnicki calls a bad game, especially in the second half. Was calling a good game in the second quarter. But things just fell apart. And from a coaching angle, from a roster angle, from a quarterback angle, Ohio State was the better team. They covered. So Ohio State still undefeated against the spread. I think they are 7-0-1. They're the only team left in football perfect against the spread. At some point, that is going to break. I don't think there's ever been a team who's undefeated against the spread. So Ohio State outperforming the books. They'll have to recalibrate there. The books will. I said in my preview and prediction that Penn State would either make this a really close game or Ohio State would win in a blowout. I hedged between the two, taking the average, and I picked Penn State to cover, but Ohio State to win by 14 to 17 points. That was just a little bit too conservative. I was correct in the sense that it would go one way or the other, but incorrect in hedging between that. Should have picked one way or the other. Look, Ohio State is one of the best teams in America, if not the best, and whether it is S&P Plus or whether it's FPI or ESPN's efficiency or FEI, there are really only anywhere from 1 to 2 and maybe 3 teams that are in their tier here. Indiana is either ahead of them or just behind them in every power rating. They're catching up to Ohio State national title odds. Oregon, in some metrics, especially FEI, is pretty close to Ohio State as well. And Alabama, in terms of title odds, the books view them as the best non-Big Ten team. So the Buckeyes are in a tier of their own right now. Penn State was able to run the football fairly effectively in the second quarter. You wouldn't know that from the final stats, but we don't like to include sacks against rushing yards. Sacks are more of a quarterback stat. Julian Sayin showed that yesterday where he got pressured 15 times. Ohio State's offensive line did not have a good day. They got beat. But Julian Sayin was able to maneuver the pocket, get the ball out effectively. His footwork is perfect. I mean, you can tell that he's well coached. He has great arm strength, elite NFL accuracy, and the chemistry with his receivers is on point. That is part of the reason why his completion percentage is so high, because he knows his receivers, their strengths, what they can do. His receivers are the 2 best in America. There's nothing they can't do, as evidenced by Tate winning possession catches all year and Zakee Wheatley batting that Julian Sayin pass, and Jeremiah Smith still makes a circus catch with his one hand. It's an incredible operation that Ohio State runs. Right now, as someone I trust said in a text to me, they are the program. And I've said for a while here, I've actually been more adamant this year that Ohio State's the number 1 program than I have been in that Ohio State's the number 1 team. I don't know if they're the number 1 team yet. And the metrics would agree with that. They're definitely in that upper tier, but Indiana is punching with them. Oregon is punching with them. Alabama, if they played an easier schedule, would probably be punching with them in the metrics, and the sportsbooks certainly think that Alabama's punching with them. But to be in the top 4 after all they lost, the coordinator changes, starting a redshirt freshman quarterback, and going, starting 8-0, 5-0 in Big Ten play, and being the favorite to win the Big Ten is what a job by Ryan Day. I mean, they are the best program in America. I don't really think it is particularly close right now. I'm not saying they will be in 5 years, not saying they were 5 years ago, but here and now, real conversation, objective fact, they're the number one program as the defending national champions and the favorites to win it all this year. Some interesting player information. Sayin had more passing touchdowns than incompletions. 4 touchdowns, 3 incompletions. Ohio State ran for 5.1 yards per carry, and I saw some people say there were encouraging signs from the run game. I don't think running against a Penn State rushing defense that sucked entering the game later is all that good of a sign. What I mean by that is Bo Jackson's 51-yard carry, which is the only reason why they averaged more than 4 yards per carry, came much later in the game when it was already put away. Like, that's saying that all of Indiana's nearly 400 rushing yards against Maryland, for example, that all of them were of equal weight. That's not true. Now, fortunately for Indiana's sake, we know their rushing offense is good because they've been able to run the ball in game when it's competitive and use that to control their opponents. Ohio State's rushing offense is really only useful for burning clock. It's not really effective at moving on the ground. It's not bad, but it's not great either. Penn State, I actually think, in terms of running back and O-line, ran the football better. Ohio State's passing offense is just that good. Their defense is better. I mean, Jim Knowles got absolutely cooked by Brian Hartline and Ryan Day. Ethan Grunkmeyer, I thought, had a good game going against this defense, and with the bad play calling that he had, I actually think he did well. I think Penn State might do well in keeping him on their roster. But this was the Julian Sayin, Jeremiah Smith, and Carnell Tate game. They are the best trio of offensive players in America right now. Julian Sayin, Carnell Tate, and Jeremiah Smith. The odds that Ohio State gets 2 players invited to the Heisman Trophy ceremony is growing. It's high, for sure. As for the rest of the season, for Penn State, you're 3-5. You're 0-5 in conference play. You are the first preseason top 2 team to lose 5 games in a row in college football history. It's been rough, and it's not going to get easier when you play Indiana at noon, and Indiana will probably make the stadium part crimson, part red, and they're favored by double digits, and they'll probably cover the spread against you in the same way that Ohio State did, because Indiana's that good. It's not going to be easy traveling to Michigan State or hosting Nebraska or hosting Rutgers. There's a good chance this team goes 3-9. There is a chance, a slim one, that this team goes 6-6. More likely than not at this point, they're probably missing a bowl game. It is what it is. Terry Smith has put forth a good effort. The team isn't totally quit, although you can tell that they're not putting forth the same effort they did against Oregon, for example, or even the first 3 games that were questionable, but they were trying. This has been a messed up year from the get-go. Always was going to be, with the circumstances that we now know behind the dysfunction preseason, with how Kotelnicki has called the season, with how Jim Knowles hasn't properly assessed the defense for whatever reason, or if he has, well, Penn State's personnel is just the worst defensive personnel that they have had probably in the Franklin era outside of maybe the first 2 years. It's been rough. We'll talk later this week about some of the coaching candidates that I think would fit at Penn State. Regardless, I strongly believe that Penn State will upgrade from James Franklin from a head coach and CEO standpoint along with resources. So I believe Penn State's future as a program is rather bright. For Ohio State, your only test for the remainder of the year is Michigan. There was a chance you were going to get it against Penn State. With how that game played out, no. I mean, Ohio State led the whole way. They dominated through the air. And from the third quarter onwards, it wasn't even a close game. Texas thought was going to be a test, but again, they led for much of the game. It was the first game of the year, and as Florida State and Alabama fans know, as Ohio State fans know, going from week 1 Julian Sayin to week 10 Julian Sayin, teams can change. in 10 weeks, especially when you're starting a new quarterback and when you lose as much production as Ohio State did. So they're a different team now. Same with Texas, same with Alabama, same with Florida State. Many of these teams are different from where they were in week 1. So before the playoffs, which they're a lock to make, before the Big Ten championship game, which they're not quite a lock to make, but they're likely to go, their only remaining test of the year is on the road against a Michigan team that beat Purdue 21-16 in his 2 losses. So this Ohio State team, I know that they are top 4. I know that they are one of the best teams in America. I know that more likely than not they're top 2. After this Saturday, I will tell you for my top 10 ratings tomorrow, I will still have them number 1. I kind of want to see how Penn State does against Indiana before I make that move of going with the power ratings trends and picking IU as the number 1 team. I kind of want to see what they do against Penn State. But I don't know if Ohio State's actually number 1 or not. I mean, every chance that they've had to be tested, they've passed with flying colors, but they haven't played Oregon on the road. They haven't played some of the teams that Alabama's played. I know people are going to be mad when I say that. The only point I'm making in saying that is we thought that Penn State was going to be number 1 versus number 2 preseason. Many people did, even a lot of Buckeyes. We thought that Texas would at least be a top 5 team. They are not that. This team is ridiculously good. They are. They're incredibly good. But before we crown them as national champions, let's let the season play out. I would pick them to beat Michigan right now, but then again, they haven't beaten Michigan since 2019. So we'll see what happens there. Big win for Ohio State. You didn't want, I think, to be tested here against this Penn State team with the effort they put forth. You pulled away in the second half, scored 38 points, and right now I would predict Julian Sayin to win the Heisman Trophy. He might even win it if they miss Indy and lose to Michigan with the numbers and completion percentage that he's putting up. That's it. Ohio State dominates Penn State. They cover the 18.5. What more can I say? Didn't mean to have that slide up. Let's get to Texas beating Vanderbilt. This was, at the end of the day, Ohio State beating Penn State was more impressive than this because Texas nearly let the ball slip out of their own court. Nearly. So, yeah. Let's see if what anyone has said in the comment section. Oh, yeah, Penn State punting on their first drive on 4th and 3 in Ohio State territory was just pitiful. Yeah, from really that play and some early tackling that Ohio State showed against Penn State, and the fact that Knowles actually for much of the game was, pressing his corners again. I could kind of tell that Penn State, while they wanted to show up, they didn't exactly show up. But that's been the case with them all season long. I mean, that's why they're 0-5 in the Big Ten. Franklin did not have a strong culture, and it fractured after that Oregon game. Just is what it is. We'll get to Michigan later. We'll actually get to Penn State even later. Not in this show, but in future shows. Texas beats Vanderbilt. They bring down the then 9th-ranked Commodores, giving them their second loss. Texas at 7-2 is still alive and well in their playoff hopes and technically their SEC championship game hopes. After this bye, they have to play Georgia on the road, then host Arkansas, then host Texas A&M. So it's a tough ride. They barely covered that 2.5. They were dominating early on, but Vanderbilt had a really strong fourth quarter. They attempted a late comeback, almost recovered the onside kick, and made it interesting in the end. I was really impressed with Texas for 3 quarters, but a football game is 60 minutes. It's 4 quarters. It's not 45 minutes or 3 quarters. And that was disappointing in the fourth quarter, to say the least. So, as with Texas, their defense has not been up to standard, I would say, over the past 3 weeks. The offense, however, with Arch Manning has begun to click. Manning has had 2 straight games against Mississippi State and Vanderbilt where he has looked like the potential first rounder that a lot of people pegged him to be preseason. Now, he won't be that unless somehow he plays like he did against Vandy and like he did against Mississippi State for the rest of the year, and they somehow go on to win it all. That probably won't happen, though. I mean, even Arch Manning, as good as he was yesterday, that 75-yard touchdown pass to Ryan Wingo, if you didn't watch that play or much of the game or the highlights, you may have thought that was a deep bomb, which is what Arch is good at. It was a screen pass out of the backfield where Manning just dumped it off and Vanderbilt couldn't tackle. And when you can't tackle Ryan Wingo, he's going to get to the end zone because he's fast. Vanderbilt, in their late comeback attempt, was able to successfully pass the ball. I think not having Michael Taff is a big part of the reason why. He was injured against Mississippi State and now injured against Vanderbilt. And we're seeing that in some games where he's been out, Texas has been vulnerable, particularly in defending the pass. But they got up big, established a big lead, then took their foot off the gas, as Sark teams usually do. It just usually happens in the third quarter, not the fourth quarter. And Vanderbilt nearly came back, but Texas ultimately won. They covered that 2.5. They had 6 sacks on Vanderbilt, with Colin Simmons having an absolutely freakish performance. Ethan Burke had 2 sacks. Texas, when they want to be, it really feels like a want to be thing where, the great teams, Ohio State this year, Indiana this year, they always play like they want to be elite and as if people are doubting them. Texas only plays that way when they're down. This is the first time I've seen them play that way to start off a game. And when they want to be, they are one of the best teams in the country. But they have to nail down that consistency, because being inconsistent will not get you a win over Georgia on the road. You have to cut the head off the snake if you want to beat Georgia. Florida failed to understand that. Well, I don't even know if they failed to understand, because they did try to go for it on 4th down to seal the game away. They just couldn't succeed at doing it. Auburn didn't succeed at doing it. Ole Miss didn't. Alabama was close. Georgia nearly beat that team, and if they did, they'd be 8-0 right now. Georgia's well coached. They're one of the best teams in America. If you're Texas, you have to, over this bye week, you have to find your high point. You have to find your ceiling, and you have to play to it. And you have to play that way the rest of the year. Arkansas is the king of 1-score losses right now. They could beat you. Texas A&M is a top 5 team in America. They could beat you. So it's a good win here. It's a much needed win for the program in Texas's first home game in over a month. But they have to put forth the effort they did in 3 quarters against Vandy for 4 quarters in their remaining 3 games, but especially the 2 games against Georgia and against Texas A&M. For Vanderbilt, their playoff hopes are alive. If they beat Auburn, and they should this Saturday, and then off the bye, they should beat Kentucky at home. And honestly, with how they play and with who Tennessee is, they should beat Tennessee too. I believe a 10-2 Vanderbilt team with wins over Missouri, LSU, South Carolina, Kentucky, Tennessee, Auburn, and a close loss to Texas and a close loss to Alabama. I know Texas was lopsided early, but they nearly came back. And as for Alabama, it was closer than that final score indicated. It was 23-14 late in the fourth quarter. I believe a 10-2 Vanderbilt would get in. Maybe I'm wrong. LSU and Auburn firing their coach, and Missouri losing their quarterback, and South Carolina likely finishing 4-8, 5-7, and firing their offensive coordinator doesn't help their case. But I think their odds of getting in, especially with the chaos that'll likely continue to occur in November, will help their chances. And they got a quarterback in Diego Pavia and a defensive front and a scheme and a coaching staff that allows them to win close games and that helps them in being a clutch football team. And they are that. As for Texas, you have to win out to be in the playoffs. Same thing with Vanderbilt. So all this game did, all it did was ensure that you're still alive in the playoff conversation. You didn't necessarily knock Vandy out of that playoff conversation, and you didn't guarantee yourself a spot either. You're not 8-0 or 9-0. You are 7-2. You cannot afford another loss. You know, you lose to Georgia, the season's probably over. You lose to Arkansas, it's definitely over. You lose to A&M, it's similar to the Georgia game, and I'm so happy that's a Friday night game too. It's gonna have its own time slot. That's gonna be incredible for the Lone Star Showdown. But Texas's season is alive, but it's still on life support. In order for life and new blood to enter this Texas season, they need to win out. And while I don't think the odds of that are high, unlike most teams who have 3 or 4 games remaining, I do believe that Texas has a slim chance to win out. They're very talented. They are finding their way offensively. And when they get Taft back on defense, I think that pass defense will find itself again. I mean, their defense outside of that has been playing at an exceptionally high level all season long. So I would not expect anything to change from that once Taft comes back. Good win for Texas. As for Vanderbilt, you were lucky that it was that close, and that might help your odds of reaching the postseason, which would be absolutely incredible given your history. Clark Lee has still done a phenomenal coaching job this year. Now, this is ugly. This is painful. This is a reality check spot. So SMU beat top 10 Miami in overtime. They earned their first top 10 win since I believe the Pony Express days, or maybe even before that. This is their first top 10 win in ACC play and only their second year within the conference. And talk about a coaching job by Rhett Lashley, where in ACC play, they only have one loss through their history in this conference. You know, they were 8-0 last year, and as of right now, you know, Miami is 2-2 in ACC play, and SMU is 4-1. That is stunning. So Miami has 4 times the ACC losses that SMU does over the past 2 years. And that is with a team that in both seasons has been power rated higher than SMU's and has more talent, more NFL talent. That is coaching right there. That is coaching. SMU wins the games they're supposed to win. I know they lost to Wake Forest by a point last weekend, but that was clearly a look-ahead spot. It's on the road, and SMU is just not the team they were last year. Because they only have one loss in the ACC, their playoff hopes are actually alive. Same with their ACC championship game hopes, especially that, because they've knocked Miami back, and it's not like Louisville, Duke, Virginia, or Georgia Tech are invincible. If SMU wins out, the chances of them being in Charlottesville, I would say, are pretty high, because I think a lot of those teams, if not all of them, are going to take at least a loss, if not multiple losses in ACC play. Georgia Tech might be different because they have that Georgia game, so they really only have 2 ACC games left, but they could lose to Pitt. They could lose to Boston College on the road. We don't know the future at all. We're just grateful to have a future. And for Miami, they should be grateful that they have that head-to-head win over Notre Dame, that they didn't lose to Notre Dame earlier in the year, or that this game didn't happen against Florida, for example. That's what they should be thankful for, or that they were able to pull away against Stanford in the second half. This is a team that, with hindsight, is not playing good football. A lot of people were fooled into believing that this was a top 2 team. Now, of course, given that I had them ranked in my top 10, and I think even top 5 at one point, I was also fooled. I never, though, believed that they were the number 1 team in the country, or that they had a very strong argument to be. And the primary reason behind that was they didn't have awesome depth at receiver. Beck was clearly not as good as Cam Ward. And their secondary still had some questions, at least in theory. And because your coach is Mario Cristobal, you can't list elite game management as a reason for why you're better than your power rating or record might suggest. So Ryan Day and Kirby Smart have earned benefit of the doubt there. Curt Cignetti certainly has, for example. Like, those right now, I think, are your top 3 coaches in football. And like Kyle Whittingham at Utah has earned that. I think Kalani Sitake at BYU has earned that. There are some other coaches where they are pluses in game management. Mario Cristobal's not that. I would actually argue that Rhett Lashley is that. SMU was outgained in total yards. SMU could not run the football to save their life. They were outgained in first downs. But SMU won the penalty battle. SMU was able to limit Miami to 2 sacks. SMU was able to exploit Miami's secondary. That's why they averaged 8.1 yards per pass attempt with 365 passing yards. That's why Kevin Jennings had a 67.6 QBR. They were able to find a way to get down the field late in the fourth quarter, tie it up despite trailing for much of the game, and then Carson Beck threw that fateful interception to Ahmad Moses, a veteran who had 2 interceptions in this game, a player who was, second first-team All-ACC caliber player in the preseason, was awesome last year. SMU's defense and team overall has not had the same success this year as last year. What a huge, gigantic win for the SMU program. There is no way to spin it other than that. And what a catastrophic loss for Miami. The only good thing about Miami at this point, the only one, is the win over Notre Dame gives you insurance to where if Notre Dame is 10-2 and you are 10-2, because you're power rated similarly enough and your 2 losses right now are close to SMU in overtime on the road and Louisville at home Friday off a bye, where if you throw 1 less turnover, if you throw 1 less pick, you probably win. Because of all those things, you will get in the playoffs over Notre Dame. You will, with the head-to-head win. As long as your team stays healthy, as long as they don't lose anymore, you will get in the playoffs over them. But that's not a positive takeaway from this game. That's from the past. In the here and now, Miami has played pretty poor football in the months of October and November. This is not championship football. The fact that they are not in the top quarter of ACC teams in terms of conference record is emasculating. That's bad. Miami has no business being in that position where you have 2 ACC losses before your final 4 games. That's bad. It's not good enough. And they can lose to Pitt on the road. I mean, watch the SMU game, even watch the Notre Dame game, the Florida game, and their game against Louisville. Tell me they can't lose to Pitt with a straight face. They can. They can lose to a lot of teams remaining on their schedule. I mean, looking at Miami's remaining schedule, we'll pull it up here in a minute with proper context. Actually, we can pull it up right now. Let's do that. Looking at Miami's schedule, Syracuse at home, you're probably not losing to them. You can lose to NC State at home on the 15th of November. At Virginia Tech, it's a road game. Louisville nearly lost there yesterday. Spooky things happen in Lane Stadium. And as for Pitt, that's going to be a cold, empty, boring environment against a team that's 7-2 and is red hot. Pitt is ahead of you in conference standings. Is there any evidence that says you are so much better than Pitt that an upset is very unlikely, if not statistically improbable? No, of course not. NC State has a more impressive conference win than anything you've had all season long. They just beat undefeated Georgia Tech at home by, I believe, double digits, if not by a touchdown. I mean, this is not a good situation if you are Miami, and they have to go back to the drawing board and figure some things out quickly. And I mean quickly because they don't really have a bye. I mean, maybe you can count Syracuse as a bye, but you have to figure things out, and you have to figure them out fast. They are not super effective at running the ball. I think part of that is because everyone knows what's coming. With Carson Beck in there, even more so than Cam Ward, they want to run it in between the tackles. They want to line it up and pound you. And that makes the offense somewhat predictable. It's been a blander offense this year. It's no coincidence that you no longer have Jacoby George, Xavier Restrepo. You no longer have, I forget his name, but awesome tight end from Miami last year, or Cam Ward. You do not have those skill position players. You don't. And that combined with coaches being smart and teams such as SMU and Louisville having really good defensive lines means they can kind of put you in a hole. They can force you to play a type of game that you don't want to play and rely on your quarterback play when you don't want to. And as my as my friend says, Timmy from South Park shows up. That's Carson Beck when he throws an interception. Like, he shows up and it's ugly and it's bad and there's nothing you can do about it. That's what the SMU game was. You're inside the 10. It's overtime. You could probably, if you wanted to really get in the end zone, run it up the middle twice in a row and maybe you get it. And instead he throws an ill-advised pick to Ahmad Moses, and at that point it's game over. So with Miami, their secondary's gettable. They're a trench team, but they're not much else outside of the trenches. And that's a bad position to be in. When you have 2 losses and you're entering the month of November with teams on your schedule that they can beat you, and they will beat you if you aren't careful. For SMU, they only have 3 games left. They should beat Boston College this Saturday, the 8th. And then they get a bye before their game against Louisville. That's going to be a big game. I mean, if they beat BC 7-3, 5-1 in ACC play, they could be ranked. That could be another, because I think last year's SMU Louisville game was ranked unranked, though I could be wrong. It could be another top-tier SMU Louisville game, except this time it's in Gerald R. Ford Stadium. It's in Dallas. So that'll be a big game. That'll be a game we preview and give a prediction for on the channel for sure. Especially given how Louisville only has 1 loss. And I think if not for SMU, I'm pretty sure that Louisville wins out. I think that's the only thing that's going to stop the Cardinals at this point is the Mustangs. They have a game against Cal. And traveling to Cal sucks, but it's also the final game of the regular season. So you can sell out for that game because you don't know what your season is going to be beyond that point. Maybe you'll reach the ACC title game, and if you do, you have a shot to go to the playoffs. If you miss, then you don't go to the playoffs, but you go 9-3, you go over on the win total, you have momentum, and you can build a better team next year and fight for the playoffs. Because a big takeaway I have from this game is that the ACC is not a good conference. The Big 12 right now is a definitively better conference. They have 2 teams that are better than Miami right now. Utah? Is anyone going to disagree with that? I don't think so. And Texas Tech, which if you disagree with that, you should be deported. Texas Tech would probably win the trenches against Miami, or at least go 50-50 with them. And they have enough talent at secondary and on the outside and good enough special teams play to probably beat Miami more times than not on a neutral field. It is crazy how disappointing the ACC has been this year. And this game kind of proves it. I mean, Miami was supposed to win by what the odds makers said, by double digits or at least by a touchdown. Power ratings agreed with that. Miami was supposed to win this game by 2 scores or more. They did not. And they never were able to pull away in the 60 minutes. I think SMU is trending up. I overall believe that Miami as a program is still at its best since the Larry Coker era because of how they recruit and how they've been able to develop. The development I don't think is an issue for Miami. I think a lot of it is coaching and mentality and play calling. The on-field stuff and the stuff in the strength and conditioning room, I think is as good as you can have it for a top-end program. Maybe not. Maybe it's not the best, but it's close. The issue is play calling. It is a mindset. It's things that are very hard to control unless the head coach is willing to look in a mirror. If Miami misses the playoffs, again, they are definitely going to have to take a look at themselves. As of right now, I wouldn't even favor them to reach the playoffs because with them and Notre Dame, and Miami needs Notre Dame to win out too. They cannot afford to have their best win have 3 losses and not even be in the playoff conversation. With some of the games left on both of their schedules, the odds that Miami is going to have a good enough resume to get into the playoffs, I think, is slim. And it's only going to get slimmer by the days unless they really change some things. SMU's front helped them win the game, so they held Miami to 4 yards per carry and had 4 TFLs. That's fantastic against that Miami offensive line. Both are technically in the playoff conversation. And as for Mario Cristobal, I don't know how else to put it outside of stating the obvious. You know, this guy is a wonderful recruiter. He knows how to set a good foundation in a program. Dan Lanning will tell you that. But in these games that are not top 10 matchups, his teams do not put forth the necessary effort to pull away and earn guaranteed wins like Ohio State's doing this year, or Indiana is doing this year, or the Michigan teams of the past did, or Georgia's doing this year and has always done it, or Kirby Smart, or Alabama has done outside of this year to Florida State. You get the point. Miami needs some changes, whether roster-wise or maybe it's assistant coaching. I think more so than anything it's mentality. And SMU's mentality is a mentality that's going to help them control this conference going forward. I mean, what a huge win for Rhett Lashley. Quickly, let's touch on Illinois dominating Rutgers. Illinois earned bowl eligibility defeating the Rutgers Scarlet Knights 35-13. They covered the 12.5-point line, and for the first time since I believe the early 2010s, Illinois had 2 seasons in a row where they are bowl eligible. It's a credit to the job that Brett Bielema has done with the Illini. Rutgers won the turnover battle, and it didn't matter. They had a lot of empty calories. At one point, this game was 35-6 Illinois. They probably could have made it worse if they wanted to. They had 7 more first downs than Rutgers, over 100 additional yards. They had 210 rushing yards on Rutgers and held Rutgers to, I know it says 59, but I want to see if that was because Illinois got a ton of pressure, which I know they did, but did that translate to sacks or not? Anyway, while I look for that, Illinois is out of the playoff picture. Rutgers obviously is too, but this was a game about pride, about showing up and showing that you can be consistent, because while the playoffs is do or die for a lot of programs, neither of these programs are in a position where not reaching the playoffs is a failure. Even this year, and I've been saying this forever, Illinois was not a playoff team. They were not. Even with all they brought back, even with their preseason top 15 ranking, even with them ranked inside the top 10 at one point, they were not a playoff team. Look at all their losses. All of them were by 3 scores or more. You simulate the season, 1,000 times. There's less than 100 times where they reach the playoffs. It's probably less than 50, even. This is through 9 games, given they have some close wins, it's probably a 5 or 6 win team on average through these 9 games. So the fact they have 6 instead of 5 is a credit to Bielema's coaching. And Illinois only had 2 sacks. So Rutgers could not run the ball between the tackles on the outside, even taking out the pass rush that the Illini were able to generate. Rutgers and Illinois each had 3 fourth down conversions. Rutgers just had 1 failed fourth down conversion, and the Illini had about a 5-minute possession advantage. Pretty good stuff from the Illini. They're fighting for pride. Rutgers is fighting for pride. Let's talk about what Rutgers has left on the plate. The Scarlet Knights, host Maryland, and if they don't beat Maryland, then it's safe to say they're finishing with 4 wins. I mean, you could maybe beat Penn State at home, but Penn State and Maryland are comparable teams. Penn State's more talented. Maryland actually has something to fight for. Rutgers needs that win against Maryland in a rivalry game. It's the only protected rivalry between both the Terrapins and Scarlet Knights. They need that win to go bowling. If this Rutgers team goes bowling, with all that's went against them, with the tough schedule they have, yes, I know Penn State hasn't panned out the way that we thought, but still it's a tough schedule. Playing both Oregon and Ohio State, Iowa looks good having to travel to Washington on the road, traveling to Illinois. It's a tough schedule. If they go bowling with what sounds like improved investment in NIL, I think the season's a success if they just go bowling. So they need that win against Maryland. You're not beating Ohio State, and between Maryland and Penn State, the odds are you're dropping one of those games. So if they can finish 2-1, that would be impressive. This is a team that really only has receivers and a quarterback. I mean, Cal McManus had to throw it 45 times, just 25-45 touchdown, 60.3 QBR. Doesn't have any more eligibility left, which is sad because he probably could benefit from another year. But he's having the best season of his career, even with a offensive line that might be one of his worst and probably is the worst of his career outside of maybe 2023 Minnesota. KJ Duff had a good day. Ian Strong had a good day. TJ Sheffield did. These Rutgers receivers are legit, but they really only have the quarterback and the receivers and maybe like a good or okay defensive back here or there. And Jai Patel, who was 2 of 2 on his field goals yesterday. That's it. As for the Illinois Fighting Illini, they have a lot more they're fighting for. They could win back-to-back. They could win 10 games back-to-back, have back-to-back double-digit win seasons. They should beat Maryland, and that is in 2 weeks. So they get a bye here to prep for Maryland at home. They should win that game. They should beat Wisconsin on the road. They should beat Northwestern at home. This team should go 9-3, and that would, in part, prove me wrong. I thought that way when they beat Duke and when they beat USC at home, that, oh, shoot, your pick of Illinois winning fewer than 8.5 games is going to look stupid unless they really trip up. And there's a chance of that happening in any of these final 3 games because Illinois isn't super talented. But winning dominantly over Rutgers is a good sign that they're going to finish November strong. Altmaier had 5 total touchdowns, only 1 pick. And right now, his QBR is an 84.7, which is 7th nationally. He has a 165 passer rating, 3 rushing touchdowns. He's going to surpass his touchdown total, barring an injury, and he's completing 70% of his throws. He is going to be drafted. He is going to play himself into someone spending a draft pick on him, and good for him. That's phenomenal stuff. I am proud of him and Brett Bielema, and it's admirable what they are doing. I mean, at one point he was a wide receiver for Ole Miss. And now here we are, and he is possibly, bless me there, going to lead Illinois to back-to-back 10-win seasons. And at least, I would say, back-to-back 9-win seasons, most likely. Very impressive performance from him throughout the year. And also got to shout out Hudson Clement, Hank Beatty, Colin Dixon. Altmaier had almost 100 rushing yards, which is just absolutely incredible. So Illinois, they're not exactly fighting for the playoffs here, but this is a team that should be proud of winning 10 games, even if that doesn't include a playoff performance. They should be proud of that. And with how they've been able to recruit and identify talent in the portal, I think Bielema's going to be at Illinois for a long time, and I think he's going to put together some teams that are going to be annoying to the teams at the top whenever they have to go to Champaign or whenever they have to host the Illini. They're always going to be a tough out under Bielema. That can be the same for Schiano, especially if what he's saying about some of their NIL attempts and about their need to recruit better using NIL is true. And they actually have a good recruiting class coming up. So that is certainly an encouraging sign, I would say. Okay, Wow. I mean, thank you guys for all the support. I mean, we've been on for quite a bit here, and we have a good amount of concurrent viewers. By the way, these clips will all be out at some point tonight. I am gonna go on a walk with my dad within an hour 30 minutes, probably. Actually, exactly an hour 30. We're not finishing in under an hour 30 at this point, but I want to go on a walk with him. So I don't know when these clips will all be out, but some of them will be out for sure. Pretty like instantaneously after the stream's done. Others will just be out later tonight. And hi, Blue Wolverine. Thank you for popping in. It's always good to see you. Mission Forward, you've been giving a lot of comments here. Illinois will get a good bowl game. If Georgia Tech does beat Georgia, Josh, they are in the playoffs for sure. And Mission for Forward 3, thank you for the $2 super chat. Love your stuff, Sam. I appreciate that. Thank you for the $2 super chat. It's crazy to see that we have a consistent 100 concurrent viewers. We've never had anything like that on our live shows ever at College Football with Sam. Hopefully one day we can get thousands of concurrent viewers. But let's move on and talk about Indiana destroying Maryland. Second-ranked Indiana beat Maryland 55-10 with 5 turnovers, only giving up 1, and that was on Indiana's first drive of the game. When I saw that drive, I thought to myself, ooh, you did the one thing you couldn't do against Maryland. You're clearly the better team, but giving them a turnover inside the 10 can give them confidence and belief. And it did, but Maryland only got a field goal out of it. And then Indiana, they gave up some pressures. They had a banged-up O-line, some banged-up skill position players, some banged-up defenders. And on their second drive, they call on, I think, 3rd and long, a halfback draw into a Maryland blitz, and it gets blown up. They have to punt. But despite the good field position, Maryland can't do anything. So they punt it back, and Indiana goes on a long touchdown drive. And at that point, I'm thinking, well, nothing Indiana did in those first 2 drives matters, because now they're in the lead, and they're probably going to win this thing. And they call the conservative game. You know, Cignetti usually doesn't kick field goals from 4th and 1 at the 1-yard line, where if you get 1 yard, and they could very easily have gotten 1 yard, you get a touchdown. I mean, Indiana's operated out of sets where they bring in Stephen Daly as a fullback, blocker, and an extra offensive lineman, and it's been unstoppable all year. They didn't bring that out. They're just, okay. Part of it was probably because of the offensive line injury and, you know, Khalil Benson being hurt. Drew Evans was out of this game. But they probably could have ran that with their backup offensive lineman and gotten in. Instead, Cignetti, no, we're going to take the points here. And they went on after that first Maryland field goal, it's a 55-7 run. And after that flukish DeJean Williams 55-yard touchdown, they went on a 35-0 run. Crazy stuff that the Indiana Hoosiers did in College Park. Almost 600 total yards, almost 400 rushing yards. People have been getting Indiana wrong all season long, acting like they've run up the score time and time again. The dirty secret is they haven't. They actually aren't running up the score as much as they were last year. Last year, there were definitely games where they're trying to get a lot of points in the fourth quarter to really inflate the score. Think of Purdue at the end of last year. Rivalry game, I know, but still they were doing that. Think of, I think it was Western Illinois last year. Think of, I would say, the Michigan State game when that was out of hand. And there were some other games probably too where they were running that score up later in the game. With Indiana, really after the third quarter in every game except for the Iowa and Oregon game, because those were actual contests, they take out the starter Fernando Mendoza. They put in the backup, his younger brother, Alberto Mendoza. And outside of maybe a third and long, they exclusively run the football. That's it. It's just handoff. It's like kind of inside zone, outside zone. It's like their RPO base offense, but either the quarterback pulls it to run or they just hand it off and see if you can stop it. And no one's been able to stop it because whether injured or not, this offensive line is deeper and better than it was last year. It's one of the best offensive lines in America. Their running back room with Roman Hemby and Kobe Martin and Keelan Black is a better unit than it was last year. They have a mobile QB, two of them, in Alberto Mendoza and Fernando Mendoza, so they can play off of that, and that helps take some pressure off their offensive line. It's a wonderful offense. I think it's the best offense in America, all things considered. It's the most talented. I think that'd be Ohio State, and then Oregon, Alabama are more talented in terms of a high school rating, which usually is correct. But I'm starting to get the sense that Indiana is a big exception to the rule in a variety of categories this year, in terms of the blue chip ratio saying that no one with less than half of their roster made up of blue chip recruits can win it all, in terms of you need freak athletes out of high school to play elite NFL football on either side of the football, and in terms of Indiana and programs that are in the top 4 of losing percentage don't win 9 games in their first 9 games. And yet Indiana has done all of these things. They had 28 first downs to Maryland's 11. Maryland averaged 2.2 yards per carry, and Indiana only got 1 sack. And Malik Washington, people have said, he's so good, and he is, all things considered. Maryland couldn't do anything offensively outside of that flukish touchdown pass. That was because Washington was able to force backup linebackers to make a decision to pursue him or to let him run against backups, mind you. This game was never close, outside of maybe the first 5-10 minutes of the first quarter. And even then, first 5-10 minutes of the first quarter are pretty much always close unless you're Iowa playing Minnesota this year. For Indiana to dominate this way, week over week over week, and their 2 closest wins are against an Iowa team who's 6-2 and top 10 in points per play margin and top 20, bordering top 15 in power ratings, and Kinnick's a hard place to play. And they have a 10-point win over an Oregon team who in FEI is close to them in Ohio State in power ratings. Same with S&P Plus and FPI. That is impressive. Indiana right now should be ranked number 1 in a college football playoff ranking. They should rank them number 1 come Tuesday. And in terms of strength of record, they're number 1. In terms of game control, Indiana should be 1. And they're very close to passing Ohio State there from ESPN. They've already passed them once in S&P Plus, though Ohio State retook that spot today, which actually makes sense because they didn't punt until garbage time, and S&P Plus is, tempo adjusted, per play adjusted. Ohio State had a lot of big plays, actually more than Indiana did, and turnovers are somewhat flukish, so to have that big of a turnover margin usually actually hurts your power rating and doesn't help it when you have a 5-1 turnover margin. But Indiana, ratings will tell you this, they're one of the best teams in the country. They're top 4, anywhere from, I think, the best in America to the 4th best team at the worst. For Maryland, playing at Rutgers and then at Illinois back-to-back, then you got to host Michigan and then play at Michigan State in Ford Field. There's a good chance you'll lose out to go 4-8. There is also a world where you win 3 out of your final 4 and you go 7-5. And I think that would be a success with how young this team is. You got Zahir Mathis, Sidney Stewart, you have Malik Washington. Those are 3-star true freshmen that you want to keep on your roster. You got Zion Ely coming in. You can build a mean pass rush in the future. And with the quarterback you have, get him better receivers, try to upgrade the offensive line, and Maryland can be a semi-complete team again like they were from 2021 to 2023, but especially 2022 and 2023. There's no shame in losing by this much to an Indiana team that could win it all. Now, you do that against Rutgers, Illinois, Michigan State, or Michigan, that's a different story. Although, Michigan's clearly, from a talent standpoint, closer to Indiana than those other teams. But Indiana is in a complete tier above any of those teams you play in the month of November. You should play Michigan State, Michigan, Illinois, Rutgers much more competitively than he did Indiana. If you don't, and you lose all those games, then maybe Maryland's looking at a different head coach entering the 2026 season. But at 4-4, 1-4 in Big Ten Conference play, season's not quite a failure yet, but things are getting ugly. With a 4-game win streak, you have to wonder where Maryland is at mentally. For the Hoosiers, at Penn State's going to be tough, but you have a noon game, and you're definitively the better team. Wisconsin at home on the 15th before entering the bye, before the Purdue game. That should be an easy win. And playing at Purdue, let's be honest here. Purdue is going to finish with a losing record no matter what. They'll be fighting for pride. Barry Odom will make sure they play hard. However, they do not have the horses to even compete with Indiana. At the very worst, Indiana will lose to Penn State and finish 11-1, at which point they're in the playoffs regardless. With the win over Oregon, over Iowa, over Illinois, they'll be in regardless. Best case scenario, you go 12-0, you go to Indy, and you win in Indy, and expanding up to the playoffs, best case scenario is you go 16-0. That's the best case scenario. The fact that's even possible is insane. But Curt Cignetti, as of the past 2 years, has been the best coach in college football. Just straight up. I know last year they benefited from an easy schedule. This year's schedule's easy too. But when you look at the other two best coaches in that time frame, Kirby Smart and Ryan Day, when you look at that, they have infinitely more talent and resources than Indiana does. Like, in the here and now, Indiana's probably very close to them in resources, honestly. But including last year, which is when Cignetti initially got there, and they weren't as bought in as they are now, to go 11-2 with that roster, and then to be in a position to win it all with this talent roster, again, on paper. In practice, this is a much more talented roster than what on paper says, but on paper usually matters, and to defy that is incredible. He has had the best coaching job of any coach over the past 2 years. I think Indiana's the best staff in America. And with the way things are trending, they're catching up to Ohio State in title odds. They have passed them in efficiency. They're trending to pass them in FPI. They're punching with them in S&P Plus and FEI. Things are trending towards Indiana being the best team in America when it's all said and done, per the analytics. We'll see if that remains the case. It's going to be tough, but for them to even be in this position is absolutely incredible. And for them to just win by 40 to 50 points here and there and last Saturday and this Saturday is nothing short of alien, of out of this world. Georgia surviving Florida. Talk about interesting there. Talk about interesting. Whew. And yeah, yeah, this Indiana team's a lot better than last year's Indiana team. They are. It's incredible. A point I want to make before we go forward is Utah is 7th in FPI, and I do not think this Utah team is better than the 21 or 22 Utah teams. They're probably not better than the 2019 Utah team either. So, case in point, all I'm saying there is that this is a very down year in football. Like this is probably a worse year at the top than last year was. I know Oregon, in terms of metrics, is probably better than they were last year, probably, but Oregon was not even top 5 in FPI last year. And they were probably, I think, your top 4 teams last year at the end were Penn State, Texas, Ohio State was obviously 1. Georgia with Beck was probably 4th. And then you probably go between Ole Miss, Notre Dame, and Oregon for 5th. I might even be forgetting a team, honestly. So, yeah. Crazy stuff. The fact Utah is 7th in FPI is nothing short of insanity. Nothing short of insanity. But that's a credit to Kyle Whittingham, and that'll be one of the final things we talk about here. Georgia survives an upset bid from Florida, winning 24-20. We were right on this, picking Georgia to win, but Florida to cover. And Georgia escaped with their rushing offense, which has been their bell cow all season long. That is what has led Georgia to wins, whether it was over Ole Miss, being able to consistently run, and in power situations too. It helped them keep Tennessee's offense off the field long enough to stay in the game, to get back in the game, to win. They were able to run on Alabama a good amount and use that to be able to move down the field and give themselves a chance there. It was a strong effort from Florida, don't get me wrong. Florida was able to perform well in the lines of scrimmage and at one point held a lead. At one point, according to ESPN Analytics, they were favored in-game to win. But Georgia got the 4th down stop. They had the Chauncey Bowens long run, someone who flipped from Florida to Georgia, and Gunnar Stockton outplayed DJ Lagway. This is coaching. This is roster building. This is Kirby Smart against an interim head coach. Florida's roster is much better than their record suggests, but their coaching staff is not. Georgia's coaching staff, meanwhile, is an accurate reflection of what their record and ranking is. One of the best staffs in America, one of the better teams in America. Florida with proper coaching could be one of the better teams in America. And that is why, if you're Florida, you should go big and you should be bold in your hiring. Like Lane Kiffin, it's been talked about for a while. Move in all the chips to hire him and retain your defensive coordinator. Florida's defense in big games has shown out in a very impressive way. So retain Ron Roberts. I mean, I think Ron Roberts, whether he's at Florida next year or in the future, is going to be a defensive coordinator on someone's staff that is going to be incredible. He's going to produce good defenses. The name of the game was that Georgia could move the ball on 3rd down, and Florida really couldn't. 7 third down conversions out of 15 attempts to Florida's 2 out of 11. And also the fact that Georgia was able to run the football at a better rate when you take out sacks. That was the difference here. I thought that Florida, kicking the field goal on 4th and goal, I thought that was a good decision. Get points, get up. Going for it on 4th and 1 in that spot with how Georgia at some point retook the lead, also think was the right decision. You're up by 3. Georgia's shown they're capable of getting into the end zone. You have not shown yourself really capable of putting together many sustainable drives. So convert here, take off more clock, and if you then have to settle for the field goal, at least you took more seconds, more minutes off. And if you're able to get in the end zone, then it's a 2-score lead and the game's over. Florida does, with their talent, have a chance to play spoiler here. So there is a world where they win out. I'm not going to lie. There is a world where, Billy Gonzalez beats Kentucky. They should beat Kentucky. They can beat Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a top 15 team that's well coached. Florida probably has the better roster than they do. They can beat Tennessee. Tennessee has not beaten Florida in the swamp in I forget how long. You probably have to go back to the Will Muschamp era. Actually, no, because Tennessee was pretty terrible then, too. I think you have to go back to, like what the Ron Zook days maybe for Tennessee to have a win in the swamp, and this Tennessee team isn't so hot. And then you look at Florida State, and it's a home game for Florida. Florida fans will show out as they did for the world's largest cocktail party. There is a world where Billy Gonzalez, goes 4-1 in his final 5 games. Do you maybe talk about him being hired as the head coach if that happens? I probably wouldn't say so, because Florida, with the capable defense and all the talent in the world they have, as long as they have someone who's good at leadership, and Gonzalez probably is that, they're able to win. But if you're Florida, you want to compete for SEC titles and playoff berths, that probably requires someone else. But maybe I'm wrong. I mean, Florida put together a good effort off the bye. We'll see if that was just interim head coach juice or if there is something to it. As for Georgia, they have everything in front of them. I mean, they should beat Mississippi State this Saturday. They should beat Texas. They should beat Charlotte. They should beat Georgia Tech. But they are now 3-1 in close games. So there is a trend of this team punching above what their practical weight class is. Because on paper, no one has a higher weight class than Georgia does with the team talent composite. But in practice, so in theory, they have a more talented roster than OSU. It's within margin of error, of course, but in theory, they have the number 1 team talent composite. Ohio State's number 3. In practice, though, Georgia has no one on their roster that is Caleb Downs or Jeremiah Smith in terms of athleticism, or probably even Carnell Tate. They don't have anyone like that. This team's weight class in practice is, as of right now, lower than their recruiting ranking is. That's due to evals, lack of experience, maybe some developmental things, though I think Georgia's an elite developmental program, so I won't go there. In terms of putting players in the draft, they're better than Ohio State and Alabama in recent memory. So I'm not going to knock Georgia's development. It's evals, it's the portal, it's how they want to play football as well. Just different things. Georgia should win out. Doesn't mean they will. They can afford a loss, though. A 10-2 Georgia's not missing the playoffs, especially when they've beaten Ole Miss, who will likely go 11-1 or at least 10-2, Tennessee, Auburn, Florida, and say you lose to one of Georgia Tech, Texas, or Mississippi State, you beat the other 2, those are going to be good wins, those other 2 games, and then Charlotte's a free win. So the rest of the year is just going to determine whether or not Georgia goes 11-1 or 10-2. Maybe there's a world they go 9-3, but I don't think so. This was a win for Georgia and Kirby Smart that is going to force them to go back to the drawing board and go back to the film room and teach them some things. But it's also a rivalry game, and with the timing of the firing, Florida was always going to bring forth their best effort. Good win for Georgia. This was a more impressive win, I think, for Georgia than Alabama's over South Carolina, for example. Michigan State losing to Minnesota. Gosh, that was tough. That was tough. Minnesota ended Jonathan Smith's career at Michigan State. Michigan State had all the opportunity in the world to win. They outgained Minnesota by 166 total yards. They had more passing yards. They had more rushing yards. They had more first downs, and they had almost a 10-minute possession advantage. This was despite Minnesota having 7 sacks to Michigan State's 1. And yet, due to 96 penalties, due to missing 2 field goals, and poor coaching, and Minnesota being mentally tougher, the Gophers escaped 23-20 in overtime. Michigan State barely covered the spread, but Minnesota won, and they reached bowl eligibility at 6-3. Michigan State drops to 3-6. And entering the bye, maybe I'm wrong here, but I would not be shocked if Jonathan Smith, Michigan State head coach, is fired tomorrow. At least I don't think he's been fired yet. This is going to be another segment of live research, but I do not think that he has not been fired. There's articles about whether he will or not be, but he's not been fired yet. Just wanted to make sure I didn't miss any live news, as I'm my own producer, along with obviously hosting the channel and talking about college football. Do a lot of things. But I do not do as much as your average Michigan State or Minnesota fan has done this year, between getting excited about opportunities and then experiencing the lows of getting blown up by Iowa or getting blown out by UCLA or Indiana, for example, or losing to Cal by 10 points. It's been a rough year for both of these teams. The difference is Minnesota has an identity and they're disciplined and they control the controllables. And Michigan State, whether or not it's because Fleck has been there for about 10 years, or close to that, and Smith's just in year 2, Minnesota won this game because they were the more disciplined team and they didn't flinch. Meanwhile, I think Michigan State flinched. For the Spartans, you get a needed bye, in theory, if you want to go bowling, but you're not beating Iowa on the road. And you'll probably drop one of Penn State or Maryland, if not both. I mean, you're talking about 3-9, 4-8 here. And that, with what Michigan State has on its roster, is not good enough. Between Nebraska, UCLA, and Minnesota, Michigan State should at least have 1 or 2 wins by this point. 1 or 2. Probably 2, given the team quit against UCLA and on another day at home possibly beats them or competes with them. And especially given how they statistically dominated Minnesota, especially in that second half. They 17 unanswered points in that second half. Michigan State dominated that. But Minnesota's first half was so good, they were able to hold on and win in overtime. Smith's time at MSU is over. And the only thing I'll say, I'll go deeper on a video this week about the ideal candidates for the Michigan State coaching job. The only thing that I will say about this in this segment is you have to get behind the next coach. I do not think that Jonathan Smith is a bad coach. I think he's a good coach. I did overestimate him and his staff, but I don't think they're a bad coach or staff. But Michigan State never bought into Jonathan Smith. I don't think that outside of the fans they were ever really excited about him. I don't think the higher-ups or donors or big-time fans ever were pumped about him. And the criticisms they gave of him last year, outside of some of the game management stuff, so the lack of emotion or the defense and kind of expecting him to fix things in year 1 when the portal quality is much worse than it was 2 or 3 years ago. This is kind of unfair. But this year, he had a chance to change that. I thought he was going to, and he hasn't. And with that, it's just not going to work because now no one's in on him. So they have to make a change. But for the next guy, they have to give him resources. Otherwise, he will fail too, and it's going to start an awkward cycle of head coaches and athletic directors being fired, and Michigan State will go back to the dark ages. And I, nor anyone who loves college football, wants to see that happen. For Minnesota, this was a needed win because a loss here could put Minnesota in danger of missing a bowl game. If you can lose to Michigan State at home, you can lose to Wisconsin at home and certainly lose to Oregon and Northwestern on the road. They'll probably lose to Oregon. Northwestern, I'd say, is a coin flip game. But being able to beat Michigan State at home and with their history in the Paul Bunyan's Axe Trophy under Fleck, they should be able to at least reach 7 wins. And I think 7 wins with this schedule is a success. I predicted 6. Minnesota's win total was 6.5 to just hit the over there with how much they lost and with how many young players they have coming back next year. I think is a success on the part of Fleck if they were able to reach 7 wins, especially if they reach 8. If they somehow win 8 games, that's coach of the year type stuff. But there have been some times where I question how the defense has looked compared to what it was last year. And then you also have the fact that Minnesota's identity with Fleck has always been they're strong in the trenches, their offensive line is physical, and they can run the ball. They can't do that this year. Their offensive line is one of the worst O-lines in the Big Ten. Just like watching them and how they do not get leverage. They don't block well. They don't get push, initial leverage. Not good stuff. But Drake Lindsay has shown promise. They have Coy Parrish back there, future NFL player. Their secondary's good and will probably only get better entering next year. They have a lot to replace on the defensive line, but they're set at linebacker. They're underrated at receiver. I think Minnesota, next year could be a good year for them, but we'll see. This year can still be a good year for them if they're able to find 8 wins, which 7's likely. Why can't you win 8? Michigan and Purdue. I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know what's going on with Michigan. Michigan survived Purdue by a score of 21-16. And with Michigan, they're such a hard team to read this year. On one hand, you have the Nebraska game and the Washington game. On the other hand, you have this game against Purdue. You have their game against Wisconsin at home, and to a lesser degree, the Michigan State game. Where Michigan State, maybe if you want to, you can chalk it up to rivalry or whatever. At one point, they were at least ahead 31-13. This game and the Wisconsin game in particular, they were never ahead by more than a score against Purdue and 2 scores against the Badgers. Their worst games against Power 4 competition of the season, outside of maybe the USC and OU games. Purdue covered. Michigan won. They escaped, but Purdue was in this thing. Purdue was live in the third and fourth quarter. If you're Michigan, you're just happy that you're 7-2 at this point. That was bad. I watched that whole game along with Nebraska USC, and if Michigan played Nebraska with TJ Lateef at quarterback, there is a chance that Nebraska with their second-string quarterback, who's nowhere near Dylan Raiola, beats Michigan. I mean, Michigan is blessed that they played this game against Purdue and not against Michigan State on the road or Washington at home or against Maryland on the road or Northwestern or Ohio State at home. It was a bad game. Michigan was able to, at the end of the day, dominate on the ground. They probably didn't run the football enough. Bryce Underwood had a very off performance. I would say it was his worst performance of the season, even including the Michigan State game. Again, it's a game on the road, and MSU is more talented than Purdue. For him to go 13 of 22 for 145 yards, a pick, and then a fumble out of the end zone, that was pretty bad. Pretty bad on the part of Michigan. They outgained Purdue by over 100 total yards, and they did have a losing turnover margin. So in theory, yes, they probably should have won by 2 scores. On average, they probably win by 2 or maybe even 3. But the fact that they would have never covered, given the circumstances in this game, is pretty scary if you're Michigan. They're still alive in their playoff hopes. They are. But you're not going to beat Ohio State, let alone Northwestern or Maryland, playing like this, given the location and caliber of teams those are. Purdue was able to run the football semi-effectively. They do have a weird offense, so I don't really take much away from Michigan's defense, honestly, especially with the 3 of the top 4 linebackers being out. But Michigan's offense is, I mean, what this is right now it's a hybrid of last year's offense and the 2021 offense. That's what you have right now. And that's not good. That is not good, especially since you do not have the defense of 2021 or the special teams unit of that year. I mean, this team would not play within 2 touchdowns of the 2021 team, 3 touchdowns of the 2022 team, would not play within 4 touchdowns of the 2023 team. Like, it's a down year in football. No, I mean, no team at the top is 2024 Ohio State, 2023 Michigan, the 2 Georgia teams, whatever. Just isn't. And Michigan is sitting top 20 in FPI, top 20 in power ratings, but not top 15. And they, against Washington, and I would even say against MSU, looked improved in part compared to earlier in the year. And the one good thing about this game was their power rushing has taken big steps forward from where it was early in the year, where they could not get 5 yards consistently. They could hit the big runs, but outside of that, they could not hit 5-yard runs consistently. Now they can, but of course, if you're a Michigan fan, the cynical thing is that Haynes is conveniently hurt the minute you can power run. Like, being able to power run, but then break off big ones makes you a totally complete rushing offense, like a Notre Dame caliber rushing offense of last year. They do not have that this year. Their offensive line isn't as good, and without the mobile QB, Denbrock's offense cannot operate at peak efficiency, especially in the ground game. But this was disheartening to see because of how Purdue's defense was able to make things look so difficult in the pass game. And that was with Michigan's receivers getting open. Now, I know Michigan suffered injuries, but for Underwood to have 2 games like that in a row is really discouraging. It would be one thing if, say, Purdue had several flukish long touchdown plays, and you look at it and you think, okay, they let Martindale have a little bit too much control of the defense again. Like, time to permanently shut that down or something. Or maybe you had guys slipping on the turf like 2 or 3 times, and Purdue gets 3 50-plus yard touchdown passes off of that. That would be one thing. But that's not what happened here. What happened was one of Michigan's best players on offense had an awful day with a 47.6 QBR. That's what happened, where he had a 105.4 passer rating. And as much as I think on an average basis he is improving throughout the year, it's not by the margin that he should be, to be frank. That falls on the staff. Also, I would say some of that falls on him because there were so many open receivers last night that he simply did not hit. That was a bad game for whatever reason. The only positive for Michigan is that their D-line, I think, in pass rush is beginning to come forward, and their depth on defense is underrated. I mean, they were so banged up at linebacker, and to hold Purdue, given losing the turnover battle and the fact that Purdue runs that weird offense with some triple option stuff, to hold them to under 300 yards and 16 points to get a turnover in the red zone, I think the defense did its job. This game was entirely on the offense for not being able to establish control. That one touchdown drive by Purdue where they took almost 10 minutes off the clock, 9 minutes 30 seconds, that was bad for sure. The final touchdown drive was not good, no. But sometimes you'll have games where your defense, whether due to turnovers or different things, will allow opponents to score double digits on you. It's hard to win games 20-10, even with limited possession. Ohio State, for example, yesterday, Penn State got 2 touchdowns because Penn State won the turnover battle, and they had one really good drive. And that's Ohio State's defense. It's the best defense in America. You don't have Ohio State's defense, so allowing 16 points I do not think is all that bad. But only putting up 21 on that defense is pedestrian. I mean, look at Purdue's schedule here. They allowed 33 to USC at home, 56 to Notre Dame on the road, 43 to Illinois at home, 27 to Minnesota on the road, 19 to Northwestern on the road, 27 to Rutgers at home, 21 to Michigan on the road. They have been able to put together some okay defensive performances, but you do not want to be one of those teams if you're Michigan. You don't. You do not. And I would venture that Purdue will give up 40 or more to Ohio State. They will give up 60 or more to Indiana because that is a rivalry game off a bye, and Cignetti will want to run up that score, and they'll give up 40 or more to Washington. I would venture. Could be wrong. Maybe they'll even beat one of those teams, but I don't think so. I think that Purdue, more likely than not, will finish 2-10. They'll be 0-9 in Big Ten play for the second year in a row. As for Michigan, all your goals are still in front of you. At least you didn't lose here, and if you lost here, but even if you beat Ohio State still, you would not be in the playoffs. By winning here, your playoff hopes are alive. You're entering the bye with some injuries to Cole Sullivan, Jayshon Barham, and Jimmy Rolder that are non-permanent, aren't season-ending, I don't believe, though maybe I could be wrong. And you can get some of those players, if not all of them, back for your final few November games, especially for that Ohio State game and Maryland game. Not shying away from Northwestern, but it's more of a neutral field game, and Northwestern does not have the talent Maryland or especially Ohio State does. And then offensively, hopefully you can get some linemen back. Haynes is getting surgery on his foot, so he probably won't appear for the rest of the year, but if you can get him back, maybe McCulley left with an injury, hopefully you can get him back. These next few games are going to be a real test of Michigan's character. If Michigan wins out somehow, some way, then I think any criticism of the coaching staff is insane if they somehow win out. Now, there's also a world where, given that performance, they lose out. If Michigan football is what they are against Purdue, they will lose to Northwestern, Maryland, and Ohio State. Then you're talking about 7-5, and a 7-5 finish probably gets Sharon Moore fired with that low of a buyout. So Michigan can go one of two ways. They can have an absolutely successful year. They can have a colossal failure. There are more ways than that. This team could go 9-3, lose to Ohio State, or maybe they lose to one of Maryland or Northwestern but beat Ohio State somehow, although I don't think that's likely. I think if you're going 9-3, you're beating Northwestern and Maryland and losing to Ohio State because they're in that own different tier that you can only hope you reach at some point in the future of your program. So that's the fork of the road that Michigan's at right now. And I think the bye is much needed. Outside of that, my takeaways are that look, Michigan's banged up. I think their rushing attack will finish as one of the nation's best, even if Haynes is out. What this offensive line has shown me in run blocking, what Marshall has shown me in power situations, what I've seen Jasper Parker do, what I've seen Bryce Underwood do on the ground. This is one of the nation's best rushing offenses. They just have a different edge to them, especially the O-line and running backs compared to what I've seen last year. Underwood, I don't know if he's regressing or not, but at this point of the year, the performance is certainly not awe-inspiring, and it's not inspiring at all. Hopefully, in the final 3 games, we can see a better version of him. Michigan special teams also don't help. Punting was a disaster, for example. And as for Purdue, they're improving. They're not a great team. They're still bad, but they're not awful. And I think at some point, Barry Odom is going to win them a Big Ten game or few. Just not this year. I have to respond to a text really quickly. Okay, we've responded to that. Let me look at the chat and how that is going. Yeah, thank you guys all for tuning in. This is awesome. We're going to get like this segment might get 4,000 to 5,000 regular views, which is just kind of crazy to see how progress has been made on this channel. Let's talk about Oklahoma beating Tennessee. And then after that, we have 2 more games, then quick recaps of the Big Ten and SEC. Those won't take that long, though. Oklahoma gets a massive SEC road win, beating Tennessee 33-27. That defensive score by R. Mason Thomas was the game. If not for that, Oklahoma loses. They still cover, but they lose. However, winning the turnover battle, winning the rushing battle, destroying Tennessee in the lines of scrimmage, and knocking them out of the college football playoff has to be satisfying for Venables after Tennessee really tried their hardest to rub it into Oklahoma last season. That's a huge win. It's a program win for Oklahoma. And it's a must win, must-win bounce-back spot after that unexpected Ole Miss loss. So I am, over the last 2 Oklahoma games, 0-2. I correctly predicted Texas would beat them, but I thought they'd beat Ole Miss, and they did not. Ole Miss should have won that game by more. I thought that Tennessee, being at home, would win this game, and while they did outgain Oklahoma, and if you take one of those turnovers away, they probably do win, or maybe it's a loss that's by less than 6. They lost. Tennessee did at home, and they're out of the playoffs now. Even if they win out, because they lost to Alabama and Georgia and Oklahoma, and they don't really have anyone else on their schedule, their season is done. They're not getting in at 9-3. At this point, you're trying to win out for pride and to build for the future. That's what you're trying to do if you're Tennessee here. They outgained Oklahoma by over 100 yards. They were able to get Oklahoma's secondary, as Ole Miss did, as Texas did, but they could not run the ball. And Heupel's offense is a run-first offense, and not being able to, not just not being able to run the ball, but also failing to protect your quarterback really puts you in a precarious position where Aguilar's under pressure, so he throws 2 interceptions. The running backs are only averaging like under 3 yards per carry, around 2.9 yards per carry. So it with that happening, obvious passing downs. Aguilar to throw it 45 times, and Joey Aguilar is not a quarterback who can win games throwing it like 40 to 50 times. That you're going to get, like against Georgia, 2 turnovers. Against Mississippi State, 40 times, 2 turnovers. Against Alabama, 44 times. 1 turnover, 1 interception. Took 4 sacks in that game too. And here against Oklahoma, 2 interceptions. When he throws it for more than 35 times, you begin to get turnovers. You begin to have Aguilar throw it to the other team instead of his team. And for the Sooners, they were able to exploit a Tennessee defensive line that just isn't as deep or strong as it was last year. Xavier Robinson had a 43-yard run. John Mateer had a 22-yard run. Mateer had a touchdown. Robinson had a touchdown. Mateer didn't throw for a touchdown, but he had a rushing touchdown. And it was just a really good game by an Oklahoma team that needed a win. 4 sacks, 4 additional TFLs on top of that. They were the better team. They are the better team. And look, they dominated the lines of scrimmage, and when you do that in the SEC, when you do that anywhere, you usually win the game. For the losing team, Tennessee, you get a bye, and then you'll beat New Mexico. And as for playing Florida and then hosting, it should say hosting Vanderbilt, not playing at Vanderbilt. You're not guaranteed any of those wins. Like, you could finish 7-5. You'll beat New Mexico, but Florida on the road, you'll probably lose that game given the history and the caliber of roster Florida has if they haven't quit by then. Vanderbilt at home. Vanderbilt's going to be fighting for a playoff spot. Their playoff hopes are alive. Yours are dead. It doesn't matter that it's in Neyland. Like, the game they play, running the ball and stopping the run, they match up perfectly with you. Not a guaranteed win. So this team very well could fall out of the top 25 at the end of the year. They could go 7-5. Certainly could go 8-4. 8-4 I think is likely here. I in fact do not think they will go 9-3 with those final 2 games. So yeah. I think that this was a needed win for Tennessee, and you just couldn't get it done. You were beat at the lines of scrimmage. You had the inferior quarterback, a quarterback who is a fit for Heupel's system in some ways, yes, but Mateer gives multiple angles to attack, and they were able to, run the ball, keep ahead. They matched you in time of possession, and that turnover was huge. That was a huge turnover, and that was due to the pass rush. So when you lose the turnover battle like that and you take that many sacks, you're usually going to lose games. And that's what happened. For Oklahoma, their hopes are technically in front of them. And with their schedule, beating a Michigan team who only has 2 losses, beating a Tennessee team who will finish with a winning record, Missouri will finish probably with a winning record, LSU probably will too. If they go 9-3, they'll be in that playoff conversation. I don't know if they'll make it. I don't think they will. I don't, because the Auburn win doesn't look super impressive. Alabama will probably beat them, but at least they get a bye to prepare for that. But 9-3 for OU would be a successful season. I think they could get in the playoffs at 9-3. And look, they're not a top 10 team, but top 15, top 20. Yeah, they're good. They might even be great. They're not elite, but this is a team that is going to fight for a playoff appearance. And if they get that, then that is going to be a huge win for Brent Venables. And I think because of this win, regardless of what happens for the rest of the year, he's going to be in Norman in 2026 and have an opportunity to continue to build his program with his identity. It's a game that was going to knock the loser out of the playoffs and keep the winner's hopes alive. The team with hope, the winner of the game, was Oklahoma in a close contest. And as for Tennessee, they're going to go home, and now they're going to start focusing on 2026 and the road ahead. Now for a painful game. Very, very painful game. USC beating Nebraska. Rest in peace to Dylan Raiola. That's all I'll say. A tragedy of errors for the Cornhuskers and a strong, stubborn effort on the ground by the Trojans results in a 21-17 win for USC. USC earned bowl eligibility. Nebraska thankfully already earned it because Dylan Raiola left the game in the third quarter with an injury. Turns out that injury is a broken fibula, and he'll be out for the year, and he'll be out for probably spring ball, or at least won't be 100% in spring ball. Very painful way to lose if you're a Nebraska fan, if you're a Nebraska player, a staff member, a coach. Nebraska at one point had a 75.7% chance to win this game, midway third quarter. From there, USC goes on a 15-3 run, and they broke 200 yards. Nebraska nearly hit 200. If you think about it that way. Both teams were able to get pressure. USC had 5 TFLs, 1 sack. Nebraska had 3 sacks and 4 total TFLs. USC, so this is something I was shocked by. And big part of the reason why, obviously, was the Raiola injury. But even with that in context, I was shocked by it. Nebraska had 98 passing yards, and USC had 135. If you told me that pre-game, I would have picked USC to win, as I did. I picked USC to win and Nebraska to cover. That's what happened. But I would have been shocked by it. I would have asked you if both quarterbacks got hurt or if there was an abrupt wind gust that maintained throughout 4 quarters and 60 minutes of the game. Maiava had no touchdowns and a pick and had his worst game through the air of the season. He had that one ugly pick to Andrew Marshall where I think he was trying to get it to Jacoby Lane, and Marshall was under him, and it's just that was his worst decision, I think, of the entire year. It was a really weird game where everyone's suspicions of USC being a mediocre road team came true, and Nebraska, for a variety of reasons, the biggest of which was outside of their control, just couldn't capitalize on it. Both teams had a turnover. The fumble recovery from when Raiola broke his fibula on that lone USC sack, and Jaden Maiava throwing that pick to Andrew Marshall. Those were the lone takeaways. Both teams had 20 first downs. Both teams at around 300 yards. USC won in rushing and in passing. They averaged more yards per play. At halftime, I thought that USC was the better team, but that due to success in the red zone, converting red zone drives into touchdowns, that Nebraska would end up pulling away and winning. I mean, look, they had a 6-minute possession advantage at the end of the day. And they matched USC in running the ball in large part because of EJ, their hero, and moving forward their best player on offense, Emmett Johnson. But didn't happen. And Emmett Johnson had an amazing day, but when your starting quarterback goes out and therefore the playbook gets limited and what you're doing on offense becomes obvious and your defense up front is limited, you are going to have issues winning games. It'd be one thing if they were up by 2 scores, but they weren't. It would be another thing if they were up by 14-6 in the fourth quarter, but they weren't. The timing of that injury, along with how USC was running the ball, was the kiss of death, sadly. And USC being the better team and having their starting quarterback healthy nullified their struggles on the road, where Lincoln Riley, outside of the state of California, is 0-12 against the spread. That streak is not broken. USC's road issues are not fixed. I will tell you in this reaction right now, maybe this will be wrong, but I don't care. If it is, I'll own it. Oregon will beat USC by 3 or 4 scores. I mean, they will blow that team out at home when USC travels to face them in the second to last weekend in November. They will destroy that team. Destroy them. And I bet you in that game, USC will run for 3 yards per carry. They might even be lucky, too. USC's not a deep team, and Trojan fans know this. They have top 10 level starters and average, so like top 30 at best backups. That's what USC is. And they've been playing some backups for several weeks now. So this was a big win for the Trojans. I know that you would have liked to see more as a USC fan, and USC fans were vocal about that, I saw on social media. But a win if you're USC is a win. To keep that class together, to build confidence for Riley and his program, and to be in the college football playoff picture, because maybe I'm wrong, and maybe they beat Oregon on the road. If they do that and then they beat Iowa at home, I mean, a 10-2 USC probably gets in the playoffs. Probably. Not a guarantee due to the possible head-to-head tie-breaking loss to Notre Dame, but they'll probably get in, given some of the wins they would earn. For Nebraska, look, if they went out 10-2, Nebraska probably gets in. And this was Nebraska's toughest game left on the schedule. This was USC's second toughest game left on the schedule. Maybe factoring in the injury, third toughest, because Iowa's really good, but I imagine Iowa traveling to USC won't play as well as they do in Kinnick. We'll see. This was a tough pill to swallow and a very painful loss if you were a Cornhusker fan. You are now an underdog to UCLA, and you will be an underdog to Penn State and Iowa. You have a much higher chance of finishing 6-6 than 9-3. Your odds of finishing 9-3 are almost 0%. Not 0%, because there always is a chance, but they're close. More likely than not, you are finishing 6-6 or 7-5. If you finish 8-4 with this injury, Matt Rule might deserve Coach of the Year or consideration for it. Outside of Cincinnati, whenever I make those analogies for Coach of the Year, this guy deserves Coach of the Year because of this, there should always be the assumption that I still think Cincinnati's Coach of the Year, because I do. So if Cincinnati didn't exist, then this guy, because of this performance, would be eligible for that. And to be fair, like many Big 12 coaches, like Kalani Sitake, Kyle Whittingham, Joey McGuire, for the moves they made in the portal, how they've hit on all their evals. Incredible stuff. But this team, for the rest of the year, is going to be a far cry from the team that competed with Michigan, that beat Cincinnati, and that was able to stage that epic comeback against Maryland. I mean, this team, I think, is sort of a shell of what they could have been, based on what we saw at times in September. And a lot of that has to do with injuries and teams figuring out Nebraska's weaknesses. And the former is not their fault. The latter, some of it's their fault, but we also have to remember that Nebraska was never going to be this great team in year 3. The whole year 3 Matt Rule thing, if you took it with realism, was more of about winning close games and being better coached and slightly more talented than much of your schedule. It was never about being this great team. So when you're just a good team in year 3 with coaching that is above average, If your best player goes down with an injury, then everything changes. And that's what I think is going to happen here. If Raiola doesn't get hurt, they beat USC. They're favored to beat UCLA, and they probably do. They're probably beating Penn State, given what I think Penn State's going to do in the next few games. Quit. I don't think they'd beat Iowa, but 9-3 would be very successful in year 3 for Nebraska. It'd be their first 9-win regular season since either 2014 or I believe it was 2013 was the last time they won 3 games in the regular season. Hard loss to stomach. Really hard loss, and I empathize with Nebraska fans there. For USC, big win. And now you have Northwestern this Friday night. That will be a test of their trench play in depth, as I think Northwestern's a competent team. They're well coached, so off the bye they should put something together. Outside of that, the season's going to come down to Iowa, Oregon, and UCLA. It's a tough stretch of games right there. UCLA being a rival, Oregon on the road. They're a better program than you. They're more talented. They have the better coach. Dan Lanning is 1-0 against Lincoln Riley. And then Iowa at home. Iowa is not Nebraska. Like, Iowa is a better team than Nebraska. That's been obvious now, I would say, for 2 weeks. And they're way better in the trenches than Nebraska is. They're better in the trenches, I think, than USC is. So that will be a test, too. Their playoff hopes are alive, yes, but I think winning 9 games would be pretty awesome for USC. And winning 8 games would not be elite. I wouldn't even say that would be a success, but it wouldn't be a failure. Winning 8 games would be enough to keep Lincoln Riley and the momentum that he's brought to the Trojans in for the 2026 year. And I think USC, with just one more year of Riley, will finally reach what it thought they would be when they hired him, a championship contender. I think they'll be that either next year or 2027. Some final takeaways before we end this segment. USC on the road is still rough. Both of these teams and programs are trending up, but by teams, I mean in the sense of a program. Like, these two teams only get worse as the year goes on this year, because USC nor Nebraska have the depth to sustain any more injuries. If they do, they could collapse. But as programs, I think they're trending up. Nebraska's safe. If they finish 6-6, nothing's happening with Rule, nor should anything happen. It'd be one thing if they finish 6-6 with Raiola healthy, but you can't predict a broken fibula. You can't do that. And yes, in theory, should they be strong enough to hold up against that? Yeah, but this isn't 2000s or early 2010s Nebraska. Like, this team is still closer to a Scott Frost team than a Bo Pelini team, or certainly a Solich or Osborne or Devaney team. They probably needed another year or 2 to establish true Big Ten depth. I mean, I could tell in the Cincinnati game that they did not have Big Ten lines of scrimmage. So from that point on, they needed to rely on their quarterback and perimeter play and defensive backfield play to win them games. That's tough to do in the Big Ten, and then you have a backup QB that's really rough. So I'm giving Rule a ton of grace. For USC, if they lose out, Riley probably is gone, but I don't think they'll lose out given the caliber of team they've shown to be through 8 games. And especially with who they are at home, they'll probably beat all their opponents at home and then lose to Oregon and go 9-3, or maybe they lose to one of their home opponents and go 8-4. But they haven't lost at home yet. And same thing with last year. They've played dramatically better at home than they have on the road. Both aren't college football playoff teams. We know this. Some parts of Nebraska's roster that are improving are their offensive line, which has really taken a big step forward these past 2 weeks, and their rushing offense, consequently, is played off of that. I'm high on both these programs long term. It was a great game. Unfortunately, we had to have a serious injury come out of it. Be praying for Dylan Raiola, and I hope he heals up quickly. And last but not least, Utah blows out Cincinnati and moves up to 7th in FPI. Who'd have thought that preseason? I was high on Utah, but no way did I think they'd be power rated top 10. You're going to see tomorrow in my top 10 that I will have Utah there, probably the 10th spot, so there is always a chance that as I look over it, they won't be in my top 10. But man, oh man, this is a better Utah team than I thought they were going to be preseason, and I picked them to win the Big 12 and win 10 games and then the 11th in the Big 12 championship game. There's a chance that still happens, by the way. They needed to beat Cincinnati to do so, and they won 45-14. Such an impressive win, such a big win for Kyle Whittingham. They have dominated everyone except for Texas Tech and BYU, who are the two teams power rated next to them in the Big 12. They're first, Texas Tech is second, BYU is 12th. Honestly, part of me doesn't understand how Utah's ahead of Texas Tech in power ratings. I think some of that has to do with how slowly Tech has played in some of their recent games with the QB injury. That's what I think part of it is. But Tech is better than Utah, at least roster-wise. Maybe once you factor in coaching, there's a sliver of a chance Utah's better, but I'm not going to play that game right now. Utah fans know based on that game that Tech is really, really good. This was a much-needed win. It was a big win. Devin Dampier played well. I think more importantly, Utah's defense was able to show up, and while Cincinnati was able to run over them and pass on them, they had a lot of empty calories. And Utah was able to parlay things into points, win the turnover battle, win the first down battle, win the penalty battle, 2 of 2 on fourth down. They had 20 more minutes of possession, which is just incredible stuff. They played Kyle Whittingham ball. And Kyle Whittingham is a coach that if, say, Utah had elite resources like Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Oregon resources, that man could win a national title. One of the best coaches in America. Entering this season, I think I had him top 10. Yeah, top 10, I believe. At one point, if you look at some of my past videos, I had him as a top 5 coach. I'm totally back on that after how the season's gone. You're 7-2, 4-2 in Big 12 play. Your quarterback, Devin Dampier, has been amazing. Your offensive line, your rushing attack has been phenomenal. Dampier is top 10 in QBR. 140 pass rating, 520 rushing yards, only taken 6 sacks. He has 20 total touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Utah was able to get 1 TFL. They didn't have an amazing day on defense, but they had a pick with Smith-Snowden. And Cincinnati, look, only getting 14 points off of 400 yards. No bueno. But missing your field goal if you're Steven Rusnak and then turning it over 3 times will certainly do that to you. Dominant win for the Utes. As for the Bearcats, your season is still alive. By the way, I have YouTube TV. So as a brief context, actually, you know what? I'll pull up an image on my phone. So I had to watch this game on my TV on YouTube. Like I had to go on one of those streams. I don't even know if I should be admitting this, but I think everyone does anyway. Like everyone who does it, like says it. So I don't think there's any concern in me admitting that I watched a stream that violated YouTube's content rules. But I did, because I care about football and I want to report this to you guys. I don't know if I'm going to be able to display it on my phone. Like I'll have to show it to the camera. But I had this weird setup where I found this guy live streaming it, and this is how it looked. Let me show you guys. I don't know if you can see it. I don't know if it'll focus. Yeah, it's not really focusing all that. Oh, there. Yeah, okay, so you can see it now. So that was the setup. That was my TV, and the game was broadcast vertically instead of the normal horizontally. They flipped it, and then look at the Cincinnati logo and the Utah logo. They added some stars to make the Utah logo like patriotic or something. And then what is that Cincinnati logo? Is that what a Bearcat is supposed to be? I have no idea. But that's how I was watching this game, and I had to tilt my head, this way, or no, it'd be this way. Actually, I had to tilt my head like this way to watch the game and to see it, which is pretty hilarious. If they win out, which they can beat Arizona, BYU, and TCU on the road. They'll probably be in the Big 12 title game. For them to even be in this position, I think makes their season a success. They have a great offense. Defense is just their biggest issue. For Utah, they're much more of a complete team, but by losing to Texas Tech and BYU, they have 2 conference losses. And unfortunately for them, BYU and Texas Tech and Cincinnati are ahead of them in standings. Cincinnati will have the head-to-head loss if they lose another game. Houston apparently is still ahead of Utah, at least according to the ESPN Big 12 standings, but I think with end-of-season tiebreakers, they would not be. I mean, Houston has not beaten any common opponent yet, and their Big 12 schedule isn't as tough. And with how they lost to West Virginia, I would imagine they have more losses on the way. So Utah's in a prime position where, if they just win out and Tech takes care of BYU and one of Cincy and then BYU and Cincy play each other and one of them takes a loss and there's another loss between those 3 teams, then Utah could get in with their schedule. And at that point, they'd be playing for a Big 12 championship and college football playoff, which is incredible. It's good stuff by Kyle Whittingham. This team is physical. They're tough. I love Devin Dampier, everything about him, his ability as a passer, more so the excitement he brings as a runner. Their offensive line is full of future pros, some underrated receivers, and an underrated back in Wayshawn Parker. Phenomenal effort by Utah. And they have dominated all 7 of their wins, and 2 of those losses, that Texas Tech game, that was decided in the 4th, but they could have beaten Utah. They could have beaten BYU, pardon me. Great team. Definitely a top 2 team in the Big 12. I would only put them behind Texas Tech. Now let's recap the Big 10 games really quickly. Same with the SEC games. Then we'll get on out of here. And unfortunately, these reactions will only be up. I'll probably be up at 10 because I'm going to go on a walk with my dad after this game. I care about having relationships with my parents, even though now I'm living on my own. But I care about them. So it's worth delaying content for an hour or 2 in exchange for spending time with them. Tomorrow, though, we will be live at 10 a.m. Like, I'll get these videos out. It'll be tough, but we'll go live tomorrow at 10 a.m. I already have a great idea of who I'm picking for this coming Saturday in a lot of these games. Iowa-Oregon's the one where I'm not certain yet. I am leaning a certain way, but we'll get to that quickly. Okay, I'm going to give you a 5-10 minute breakdown of Week 10's Big 10 slate. Talk about all of the games: Indiana, Maryland, Michigan, Purdue, Ohio State, Penn State, Rutgers, Illinois, Michigan State, Minnesota, USC, Nebraska. I got them all. Good. So let's go from the noon window to the evening window here. Penn State, Ohio State. So Ohio State is the favorite to win it all, the favorite to win the Big Ten. They're number 1 in FPI, number 1 in S&P Plus, in FEI. Indiana passed them in ESPN's efficiency metrics and in points per play margin, but Ohio State is the consensus number 1 team in America right now. By odds, by ratings, by rankings. They showed you why. They didn't punt until the 4th quarter. They had an unfortunate turnover that is unusual for them with their second-string running back, and that's how Penn State got 2 touchdowns instead of just 1. Penn State did not call a good game. I think that if they called more plays with an extra offensive lineman and ran to the outside more and played off of that, they probably could have put up 20 or more points. It was the first game where I really felt like Ohio State's defense was mortal and where it's not the same unit it was last year. This was the first game I really felt that, where Penn State's offense last year is clearly better than this Penn State offense, and yet Penn State was able to put together some sustainable drives, and they were able to convert a decent amount of third downs to where, yes, for now, this Ohio State defense has looked better than last year's, but in a game like this, it made me think, like, interesting. Maybe this unit isn't as good as last year's unit. It's still an elite unit relative to this year. 2024 Ohio State was insane in the playoffs. It's hard for any defense to play to that level, so no shame if it's true. But it is also just one game, and also a game where, while Ohio State's defense disappointed me a tad bit, the offense really impressed me. The rushing attack, no, but when you throw more touchdowns than incompletions, nothing to complain about. Sayin he's better than Howard, he's better than Kyle McCord, and there's a chance that he can match what C.J. Stroud did based on the talent there. And those receivers in Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith, I had Smith preseason number 1 wide receiver. I think that's a given, but some did not for whatever reason. And Carnell Tate is playing like the second best wide receiver in America. So incredible stuff from them. Rutgers, Illinois, a game played for pride. Illinois showed out. Rutgers is clearly limited and broken as a team. Probably earned their last win of the year against Purdue, though maybe against either Maryland or maybe against Penn State. They can win both those and go bowling. I don't know. But Illinois earned bowl eligibility, and if they earn back-to-back double-digit win seasons, Bielema will have had one of the more impressive coaching performances the past 2 seasons. Speaking of impressive coaching performances since 2024, I give you Indiana beating Maryland 55-10. Indiana moves on to 9-0. They've already passed their preseason win total of 8.5. They are ahead of Ohio State in efficiency and points per play margin. They're the only team that is battling with Ohio State in terms of beating them in some way in metrics. Every other team is behind Ohio State in all the advanced analytics. And they had a 5-1 turnover advantage. They were able to get pressure on Malik Washington. Maryland couldn't run the football. Teams can't run the football in Indiana. That is their bread and butter. It's a defense that very much reminds me of Michigan's defenses with Minter and Mike McDonald, where you cannot run on them. You can't. If you're going to beat them, it's through the air. Reminds me of Ohio State's defense towards the end of last year. Can't run on them. If you're going to beat them, you have to do it against their corners. And by corners, I mean not D'Angelo Pons. Not him. And you have to get some fluky plays. This is a defense that is among the nation's best right now. I would not say it's better than Ohio State's at this current moment. Would not say that. But it's getting to be in that conversation. Let's just put it that way. Fernando Mendoza did not have a perfect day through the air, but after that first turnover, he did well. He did well on the ground. His brother did well on the ground running. Indiana put up nearly 400 rushing yards. This is a team that can win in a variety of ways, and they were injured in that game and still ran that way. This team is so much deeper than last year's team. It's very much as if Cignetti is copying what Saban did. He's not Saban. No one will be. And Indiana will not have the success that Saban did at Alabama. Just won't happen. That was an anomaly. Saban's the greatest of all time. Cignetti is not, barring something insane happening. But you know how Alabama went from 2007 to 2008 and their roster totally transformed? That's what this is. At least that's how I see it. The record change isn't as drastic, but how this team plays and who they are, I believe, is that drastic. Michigan State lost to Minnesota in overtime. Not much else to say other than Minnesota continues to find ways to win when they should lose, at least on paper, or it looks like they're going to on TV, on the field. And Michigan State finds ways to lose. Jonathan Smith, he's probably going to be fired at the end of the year. And PJ Fleck is going to have an opportunity to maybe break through again next year with how much should return. Michigan barely escapes Purdue. It's humiliating if you're a Michigan guy, but a win is a win. Purdue's improving, but for Michigan, you got to fix some things if you want any hope at beating Ohio State. and if you want to avoid upsets by Northwestern and Maryland. As for USC Nebraska, both programs are trending up long term. It's just hard to win a game when your starter breaks one of his bones in his lower body. It's not like he broke a finger and he can tape it together and it's on his non-dominant hand, his non-throwing hand. Then he can play with a broken bone and be fine. That is not the case at all with a broken fibula. And that ended Nebraska's hopes at a playoff, ended their hopes at beating USC. It's a big win for USC, even though that benefited them, the injury, because I think Nebraska wins with a healthy Raiola. But USC earns bowl eligibility. They get some momentum after losing to Notre Dame, and their playoff hopes are still alive and well. That is my recap of every Week 10 Big Ten game. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Now, we go to the SEC. That's where we go now. I forgot to do the Big Ten standings, but I think that's okay. I'm going to give you a breakdown for every SEC game in Week 10 in about 5-10 minutes. Let's do it. First and foremost, we have Texas Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, they made it interesting in the fourth quarter, but Texas was able to prevail. They had a huge first three quarters, looked like the complete preseason top 5 team that many people, including myself, projected them to be. If they can put everything together and play to their ceiling, this is a dangerous team for sure. That's where I'll leave it at. Georgia escapes Florida. Florida has a talented roster. I would not be shocked if Florida goes bowling and they ruin someone's season. So Ole Miss, or they make Tennessee's season worse than it already is. Would not be shocked if that were the case. But they did not beat Georgia because Georgia's better coached, and Georgia was able to run the ball better and really beat Florida at their own game. And Gunnar Stockton outplayed Carson. I mean, he did outplay Carson Beck, but he also outplayed DJ Lagway in QBR. Mississippi State, they were down to Arkansas by double digits at one point. They were able to come back, win their first SEC conference game since 2023, I believe. Won their first SEC game since that season. Wow. Arkansas has been really... I projected them to go 10-2, but I kind of went off of that after seeing how good their offense was and after seeing Petrino being named the interim. Because they've scored points, but they just don't have a defense worth a lick. So they have dropped now 7 straight games. I do not know who's going to be their next head coach. It's not going to be Rhett Lashley. I almost wouldn't be shocked if they make a deal with the devil and hire Petrino as their next coach. For Mississippi State, they only need one more win to gain bowl eligibility, and that's huge for Jeff Lebby in year 2. Mississippi, Ole Miss, they beat South Carolina 30-14. South Carolina fired their offensive coordinator today. Not a shock at all. It's been a failure at South Carolina this year. They are not going to beat A&M on the road. Highly doubt it. And a win over Clemson's not guaranteed. So you're looking at 4-8, 5-7 at this point. And the seat being warm for Shane Beamer next year. That's what you're looking at. For Ole Miss, they move on to 8-1. They're firmly in the playoffs if they win out. If Oklahoma continues to win, and even if Ole Miss, say, drops a game to Florida or Mississippi State, they're probably still in. Though I don't know, because a 10-2 Ole Miss with that schedule's not the strongest resume. But if they win, they're in, and they, in theory and on paper, should win out. For Oklahoma, much-needed win over Tennessee. Multiple turnovers, multiple sacks, a defensive touchdown. John Mateer played well. Oklahoma is finding their way on the ground, which is important, not just for this year, but for next year, too. It's very important that Oklahoma is able to run the football next year when they're going to lose some of those guys on defense, and some of their, I think, struggles in recruiting are going to start hitting them. Let's just put it that way. So Being able to find a rushing attack and the offensive line getting better as the year goes on is huge. By the way, circling back to O-line, speaking of that, Ole Miss sacking Sellers 6 times is... yikes. That's bad. Same thing with Kentucky beating Auburn 10-3. The game that got Hugh Freeze fired. Wow. What an idiot. Starting Ashton Daniels over Jackson Arnold. You knew that Ashton Daniels wasn't going to be better than Arnold, too. Like, that move just made no sense. I'm a couch potato. That's why I sit here and make money talking about football, like from an outsider perspective, instead of talking about it from a coaching perspective or playing it. And I could have told you that starting Arnold would be the right move. Like, Freeze is just, he is so close, like someone with no vision trying to look at their phone. He is so close to the situation that he is incapable of getting out of his own head or getting out from up his you-know-what. He deserved to be fired for, I mean, losing to Kentucky. If Texas lost to Kentucky a few weeks ago, someone on that staff should have been fired the following day for the act of losing to that awful, godforsaken program. And Auburn did it. Texas, to their credit, escaped. Auburn lost at home to Kentucky. At home. So they're going to be in the market for a new head coach. As for Kentucky, they'll probably finish with a losing record still, and they're stuck with Mark Stoops for the long term. Let me know your thoughts on all those games and also on my brief analysis of them down in the comments section below. And last but certainly not least, I want to discuss Iowa and Oregon and give an early preview on it. Actually, you know what? Nah. We're over time anyway. And I'm going to release this video at 10 or 11 p.m. only for 12 hours later for me to have like a normal preview out. No. Not going to do that. Not going to do that. It's not worth it. It's not worth the extra 10, 15 minutes. It's not worth the opportunity cost. We will be live back at you tomorrow. Again, 10 a.m. That's the new schedule. If you can't make it, you can always rewatch. Always. So 10 a.m. tomorrow, we'll be live. Please be there. It'd be awesome to be there with a ton of views. We'll be previewing tons of games. As much content as I can talk about, we're talking about. Because since it's early in the morning and I'll be energetic, if we do a 2.5-hour show, perfect. It's a 3-hour show because we do 15 topics. Again, perfect. It's going to be an incredible day tomorrow. So please be there. 10 a.m. Eastern time. I'll see you all very soon.